Hello guys, welcome to Soul Fiction. So in this video, we will see, what if Naruto awakens the power of Dragon Bloodline and married Rias in the DxD verse? If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1. An unfamiliar sky. The world had been reduced to mud and screams. Rain, thick with ash and blood, plastered Naruto's orange jacket to his skin, the vibrant color a cruel joke in the gray, dying landscape. He could taste ozone and churned earth on his tongue. Another explosion ripped through the air to his left, and he threw himself sideways, the ground where he'd been standing erupting into a geyser of rock and shattered tree limbs. His ears rang, a high, piercing whine that almost drowned out the frantic beating of his heart. He was running on fumes, the last dregs of Kurama's chakra a faint, sputtering warmth in his gut. Sage mode had long since faded, the stillness it required an impossible luxury. He was just a boy again, 16 years old and fighting a war that was meant for gods and legends. His opponent wasn't a god, but it might as well have been. One of Madara's horrifying puppets, a reanimated shinobi from a forgotten clan whose body had been twisted and augmented with Hashirama's cells. It moved with a grotesque, unnatural speed, its limbs stretching like rubber, its skin the color of dead wood. It didn't speak, didn't show pain, it just destroyed. Naruto skidded to a halt in the muck, his breath coming in ragged, desperate gasps. He formed a Rasengan in his palm, the spiraling blue chakra flickering weakly. It was a pale imitation of its usual brilliance. He needed more. He needed something. Still fighting, little fox. The voice echoed in his mind, ancient and weary. Kurama, there is nothing left to give. Just a little more, Naruto pleaded, his thoughts a frantic scramble. Enough to make one more opening. The wooden puppet blurred, appearing directly in front of him. Naruto shoved the Rasengan forward, aiming for its chest. The puppet didn't even try to dodge. A thick, bark-like armor plated its torso, and the Rasengan ground against it, gouging out splinters but failing to penetrate. A wooden hand, hard as iron, lashed out and caught Naruto across the face. The world spun. He hit the ground hard, the impact forcing the last bit of air from his lungs. He tasted blood, coppery and sharp. Through a haze of pain, he saw the puppet raise a hand. Its fingers sharpening into 5 lethal spikes aimed at his heart. This was it. He had survived so much. Pain. Akatsuki. Madara. He had promised everyone he would bring Sasuke back, that he would end this war. That he would become Hokage. The faces of his friends flashed through his mind. Sakura's determined frown, Kakashi's lazy eye, Iruka-sensei's proud smile. He had failed them. I'm sorry, he whispered to the uncaring. Ash-filled sky. As the sharpened fingers plunged downward, something deep within him broke. It wasn't a conscious decision. It was a primal, instinctual rejection of his fate. A dam of flesh and bone and generations of carefully constructed genetics burst apart. It was a power he never knew he had, a legacy sealed in his very blood, far older than the Uzumaki clan, older than the Sage of Six Paths. It was the sleeping dragon, awakened by the promise of its host's imminent death. A wave of heat, hotter than any fire jutsu he had ever felt, erupted from the center of his being. It was not chakra. It was something else entirely, wilder, more chaotic, a torrent of pure, furious life. The puppet's hand, inches from his chest, was incinerated, turning from wood to ash in a silent flash of crimson light. The puppet recoiled, its impassive face showing the first hint of confusion. Naruto screamed, but the sound was wrong. It was deeper, a guttural roar that tore from his throat. Echoing with the power of an alpha predator. He felt his skin split along his arms and cheeks, not from injury, but from something forcing its way out. He staggered to his feet, his body trembling uncontrollably. He looked down at his hands. Over the back of his palms and up his forearms, interlocking scales of a deep, burnished crimson had pushed through the skin. They shimmered in the dim light, catching the rain like tiny jewels. The pain was excruciating, 1,000 knives carving him from the inside out, but beneath the pain was a surge of power that made the Kyubis chakra feel like a gentle stream next to a raging ocean. The world looked different, sharper. He could see every drop of rain as it fell, could smell the fear scent of the Zetsu hiding half a mile away. Could feel the life force of the earth groaning beneath his feet. The wooden puppet, recovering its programming, charged again. This time, Naruto didn't try to form a jutsu. He didn't need to. He simply met the charge. His right hand clenched into a fist. The crimson scales spread, covering his entire arm in a seamless gauntlet. He swung. There was no finesse, no technique. It was a punch born of pure, unadulterated force. The impact didn't make a sound. There was only a flash of crimson energy, and the puppet, the seemingly indestructible war machine, simply ceased to exist. One moment it was there. The next it was a cloud of vaporized wood and organic matter that the rain quickly washed away. Naruto stood panting in the sudden silence, staring at his scaled fist. The power was intoxicating, terrifying. It sang in his veins. A song of fire and fury, promising him the strength to end this war, to protect everyone. But it also whispered of consumption, of burning the world down to cinders and ruling over the ashes. The energy, having no enemy to vent itself upon, turned inward. The roar in his blood became a shriek. His vision swam, the sharp details of the world blurring into a nauseating smear of color. He felt a tearing sensation, not in his body, but in the very fabric of the world around him. He looked up. The gray sky, already unnatural from the infinite Tsukuyomi, was cracking like glass. A jagged, black line split the heavens, leaking a violet energy that didn't belong. The tear widened, the edges sizzling as it consumed clouds and air and light. It wasn't a jutsu. It was a wound in reality itself. A powerful, irresistible force pulled at him. He tried to anchor himself, digging his feet into the mud, but he had no strength left. The draconic power, having saved his life, now offered him up to the abyss. "Kurama," he yelled, his voice a mix of boy and beast. There was no answer. His vision went black as he was ripped from his world, the screams of the bat. Leffield replaced by an utterly alien silence. He woke to the smell of garbage and damp concrete. His first conscious thought was of pain. Every muscle in his body felt like it had been torn apart and crudely stitched back together. He tried to sit up, hissing as a sharp, stabbing sensation shot through his ribs. His orange jacket was gone, leaving him in a tattered black shirt and torn pants. The crimson scales had receded, leaving behind raw, red skin that stung in the cool night air. He pushed himself into a sitting position, his back scraping against a brick wall. He was in a narrow alley, flanked by tall buildings that blotted out most of the sky. Strange, glowing rectangles of light dotted their surfaces, windows, he realized, but of a kind he'd never seen before. A low hum pervaded the air, the sound of something. Technology. It was far more advanced than anything in Konoha. Panic began to set in, cold and sharp. He reached inward for Kurama, for the familiar, grumpy presence T had been his constant companion for as long as he could remember. Nothing. He reached for his own chakra, the wellspring of his power. It was gone, not just depleted, but shattered. His chakra coils felt like severed ropes, frayed and useless. The only thing he could feel was the faint, dangerous echo of the other power, the crimson energy, now slumbering deep within him like a coiled serpent. He was alone, powerless, in a world he didn't recognize. The panic threatened to consume him, but years of shinobi training took over. Assess the situation, find information, survive. He forced himself to his feet, using the wall for support. His legs trembled, but they held. He needed to get out of this alley, to see where he was. Before he could take a step, he felt it. A sudden, chilling pressure in the air. He had no chakra to sense with, but his raw instincts, honed by a lifetime of combat and now amplified by whatever had awakened in him, screamed a warning. He wasn't alone anymore. From the shadows at the mouth of the alley, figures emerged. There were 5 of them. They moved with a silent grace that spoke of power. The one in the lead was a young woman with hair the color of blood. A shade so vibrant it seemed to glow in the dim light. Her eyes, a startling blue-green, held an aristocratic calm as they swept over him, assessing, calculating. Flanking her were others, a woman with black hair tied in a long ponytail who smiled playfully, though her eyes were anything but, a handsome blonde boy with a gentle face but the posture of a seasoned swordsman, a small, white-haired G. IRL who watched him with unnerving stillness, and a brown-haired boy who looked utterly out of place, his expression a mixture of fear and awe. Naruto's hand instinctively went to his hip for a kunai pouch that wasn't there. He forced himself to stand straight, ignoring the screaming of his muscles. He met the redhead's gaze, projecting a confidence he absolutely did not feel. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice hoarse. The redhead tilted her head, a small, curious smile playing on her lips. "I could ask you the same thing. It's not every day a power source like yours simply appears in the middle of Kuo town." It was quite the explosion. Her voice was calm, but Naruto could feel the immense energy radiating from her, a pressure that felt dark and ancient. Demonic. He didn't know how he knew, he just did. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, opting for denial. "I'm just a traveler. Got lost." The black-haired woman giggled. Era, a lost traveler who radiates enough draconic energy to level a city block. You must have a terrible sense of direction. Draconic energy. So that's what it was. The word felt right, settling into his mind with a disturbing sense of familiarity. Before he could respond, a new presence made itself known. It was a foul, putrid feeling, a miasma of hunger and corruption. From the other end of the alley, a creature crawled out of the darkness. It was a grotesque parody of a human, with skin like stretched leather, too many joints in its limbs, and a wide, slobbering maw filled with needle-like teeth. Its eyes, burning with a feral red light, fixed on Naruto. The brown-haired boy yelped. "A stray, Rias, that's a stray devil. I see that, Issei," the redhead, Rias, said, her voice tight with annoyance. She never took her eyes off Naruto. "It seems you've attracted some unwanted attention." The stray devil ignored the group of five, its entire focus on Naruto. It could sense the immense, raw power sleeping inside him, a feast waiting to be devoured. It let out a chittering screech and lunged, its claws extended. Naruto didn't have time to think. His body moved on its own. He couldn't dodge. He was too injured, too slow. So he met it head-on. As the stray's claws raked towards his face, he threw his left arm up to block. The skin on his forearm split open and the crimson scales burst forth, forming a perfect, interlocking shield. Clang! The sound of metal on metal rang through the alley. The stray's claws, which could likely shred steel, scraped harmlessly against his scales, sending up a shower of sparks. The creature shrieked in frustration and pain. Naruto's eyes widened in shock, but he didn't hesitate. His right hand shot forward, his palm open. He didn't know what he was doing, only that he needed to push the monster away. A ball of swirling crimson energy, dense and chaotic, materialized in his hand. It wasn't a Rasengan, but it felt similar, a contained storm of power. He slammed it into the stray's chest. The resulting explosion was not large, but it was concussive. The stray was blasted backward, tumbling through the air and crashing into the far wall of the alley with enough force to crack the brick. It slumped to the ground, whimpering and broken. Naruto stood panting, his scaled arm still raised, the crimson energy fading from his other palm. He stared at the twitching form of the stray, then back at his own arm. The scales receded, sinking back beneath his skin, leaving it raw and bleeding. Silence descended upon the alley. The five newcomers were staring at him, their expressions a mixture of shock, awe, and in the case of the redhead, intense, undisguised interest. "Incredible," the blonde boy murmured, his hand resting on the hilt of a sword Naruto hadn't noticed before. Tamani, fest a defensive ability and an offensive one with no incantation, pure, raw power. "He didn't just repel it," the little white-haired girl said, her voice flat. "He broke its core with one hit." Rias took a step forward, her calm demeanor back in place, but her eyes burned with a new intensity. "You are no mere traveler. That power, it's not a sacred gear. It's innate, part of you." Naruto didn't answer. He was drained. The brief surge of power had taken everything he had left. His knees buckled, and he leaned heavily against the wall to keep from collapsing. "My name is Rias Ramori," she continued, her voice softening slightly. She stopped a few feet away, giving him space. "My companions and I are the masters of this territory. You have brought a significant disturbance to it." She paused, letting the statement hang in the air. "Ordinarily, I would be forced to eliminate such an unknown and powerful variable. Naruto's head snapped up, his eyes narrowing. It was a threat, plain and simple. But, Rias went on, a calculating glint in her eye, I am also in a position to make an offer. You're lost, alone, and clearly have no understanding of the power you wield. I can offer you sanctuary. I can give you answers. A place to stay, and a purpose in this world. What's the catch? Naruto rasped, his throat dry. He'd learned a long time ago that nothing was ever free. A genuine smile touched Rias's lips. The catch is that you would belong to me. You would become a part of my family, my peerage. Your strength would become my strength. Become her property. A tool. The words struck a nerve, reminding him of how the villagers used to see him, not as a person, but as the Kyuubi's container. A weapon to be feared and used. A flicker of the crimson energy flared in his eyes. Rias saw it and held up a hand. Do not misunderstand me, she said, her tone suddenly serious. I am not asking for a slave. I am offering an alliance. A home. You protect me and mine, and I will protect you and help you master the dragon sleeping in your blood. I will give you a place to belong. A place to belong. The words echoed in the lonely, empty space where his home used to be. He looked at her, truly looked at her. He saw the power, the arrogance of a noble born, but underneath it, he saw sincerity. He saw a leader who cared for the strange, mismatched group behind her. He saw a lifeline. He was bleeding, exhausted, and trapped in a world that made no sense. He had no other options. Survival came first. He could figure out the rest later. He pushed himself off the wall, standing as tall as he could manage. He met her gaze, his own blue eyes clear and defiant. All right, Rias Grimori, Naruto Uzumaki said, the name feeling foreign on his own tongue. You've got a deal. For now. Rias's smile widened, triumphant and brilliant. Welcome to the Occult Research Club. High above, on the rooftop of the tallest building overlooking the scene, a figure cloaked in shimmering white I'd watched the group disappear into a glowing red magic circle. The figure raised a hand to its ear, a communications device that wasn't technological but woven from pure light. Report. A voice, calm and melodic, echoed in its mind. The anomaly has been designated, the scout reported, its own voice a dispassionate whisper. Draconic in nature, primal and uncontrolled. It has made contact with the Grimori heiress. They have taken it in. There was a pause on the other end. An untamed dragon siding with devils. A chaotic variable. Keep it under observation. The arbiter will want to know if it is a weed to be pulled or a tool to be sharpened. Understood. The figure of light dissolved, leaving the rooftop empty, the only evidence of its presence the faint scent of ozone and sterile hideousness that was quickly washed away by the night's rain. Chapter 1 End. Chapter 2. The Devil's Gambit. The first thing Naruto noticed about the Occult Research Club was that it smelled of old paper and black tea. The second was that it was far larger on the inside than it appeared on the outside. He had followed Rias through the doors of a dilapidated, vine-covered building on the far side of the sprawling Kuo Academy campus, expecting a cramped, dusty room. Instead, he found himself in a spacious, elegantly furnished lounge that looked more like the lobby of a high-class hotel than a high school clubroom. A plush velvet sofa and matching armchairs were arranged around a low, polished wood table. A grand fireplace, currently unlit, dominated one wall, its mantel adorned with antique-looking curiosities. Bookshelves crammed with leather-bound tomes lined another. The entire room was bathed in the warm, gentle glow of a crystal chandelier. A set of double doors on the far side of T. room presumably led deeper into the building. Make yourself comfortable, Rias said, gesturing towards the sofa. She moved with an easy grace, her crimson hair fanning out behind her as she walked towards a small, well-stocked kitchenette in the corner. Akano, be a dear and brew some tea. Of course, President, the black-haired girl, Akano, replied with a smile that was both warm and unsettlingly sharp. She followed Rias, her hips swaying in a way that Naruto was fairly certain was deliberately provocative. He remained standing, his body tense, scanning the room. His shinobi senses, even without chakra, were screaming at him. The very air in this place was thick with an energy that felt alien and dangerous. It was the same dark, demonic power he'd felt from Rias and her group, but concentrated, 100 times stronger. This room was a den of predators, and he had just willingly walked into it. The small, white-haired girl, who he'd heard Issei call Kaneko, had already curled up in one of the armchairs with a chocolate bar, seemingly oblivious to his presence. The blond boy, Kiba, leaned against the fireplace mantel, his hand never far from his side, where Naruto now noticed the faint shimmer of a sword hilt that seemed to phase in and out of existence. Issei, the brown-haired boy, was staring at him with wide, nervous eyes, looking like a rabbit that had just stumbled into a wolf pack. Naruto's gaze settled back on Rias. She had taken a seat in the armchair opposite Kaneko, crossing her legs with a refined elegance that seemed completely at odds with the immense pow he felt simmering just beneath her skin. She was watching him, her blue-green eyes filled with an unreadable expression. "You are wary," she stated, her voice calm and even. "That is wise. It will serve you well here." "Where is here?" Naruto asked, his voice still rough. "And what are you?" "Here is my territory. My sanctuary," Rias replied. "And as for what we are devils." The word hung in the air, heavy with implication. Devils, demons, beings of darkness. Naruto's mind raced, trying to reconcile the stories and myths he'd heard as a child with the group of teenagers in front of him. They didn't look like the monsters from the old tales. They looked normal, almost. "Devils," he repeated, testing the word. "So the monster in the alley." "A stray," Kiba supplied, his voice smooth and pleasant. "A devil who lost its master and allowed its instincts to consume it. They are feral, dangerous creatures that we are responsible for cleaning up." "And you want me to be one of your peerage?" Naruto asked, his eyes narrowing as he looked at Rias. "Your property." Rias's expression tightened slightly at his tone. "I told you, it is not slavery. It is a system of mutual benefit. Devils of high standing, like myself, are granted a set of evil pieces, modeled after the game of chess. A king, a queen, 2 rooks, 2 knights, 2 bishops, and 8 pawns. With these, we can incarnate other beings into our service as devils. They gain a new life, enhanced abilities, and the protection of our house. In return, they serve us, lend us their strength, and fight for us in official matches called rating games." She gestured to the others. "Akano is my queen. Kiba is one of my knights. Kaneko is one of my rooks. And Issei." She paused, a flicker of something, amusement, exasperation, crossing her face. "Issei is my pawn. All 8 pieces of him." Issei puffed out his chest with a strange sort of pride. "That's right. I'm gonna be the most powerful pawn ever." Naruto ignored him. He was still processing. Reincarnation. Chess pieces. It sounded like something out of a bizarre fantasy novel. "So you're a king?" he asked Rias. "That is correct," she confirmed. "And you, Naruto Uzumaki, radiate a power that defies classification. It is not a sacred gear, the miraculous items bestowed upon humans by the God of the Bible. It is something inherent to you, something primal. I would offer you a place in my peerage, likely as my second rook, but to do so would require you to die first." Naruto's blood ran cold. Die. The reincarnation process requires the subject to be on the verge of death. Rias explained calmly. "It is how we save them, by giving them a new life as a devil. But you are not dying. And I sense that trying to kill you would be a very, very bad idea." She leaned forward, her gaze intense. "So, I will amend my offer. You will not be a member of my peerage, not in the traditional sense. You will be an ally, a protector of the House of Grimoire in this territory. You will have your freedom, but you will answer my call when I have need of your strength. In return, you will have sanctuary, access to our resources, and our help in understanding the power you possess. Does this arrangement suit you?" It was a better deal than he'd expected. He wouldn't be her subordinate, but an independent contractor of sorts. It gave him autonomy, which he valued above all else. Still, he was tying his fate to a devil. "What other choice do I have?" a pragmatic voice in his head asked. He was in a foreign world with no power, no allies, and no knowledge. This was a lifeline. He could play along, gather information, and if this arrangement turned sour, he would find a way to break it. "Fine," he said, his voice firm. "I accept your terms. Ally of the House of Grimoire. Protector of whatever this place is. Huo Town. Rias smiled, a genuinely pleased, radiant smile that transformed her face, making her look less like a calculating noble and more like a girl his age. Excellent. I'm glad we could come to an understanding. Akeno returned with a tray bearing a porcelain teapot and several delicate cups. She poured the tea with a practiced, elegant grace, the fragrant steam filling the air. She handed a cup to Naruto. He took it, the warmth of the porcelain a small, comforting sensation in his cold hands. He took a sip. It was delicious, a complex blend of herbs and spices that he'd never tasted before. He found himself relaxing, just a fraction. The tension in his shoulders eased. Now then, Rias said, her tone becoming more business-like. The first order of business is to gauge the extent of your abilities. Your display in the alley was impressive, but it was reactive, instinctual. We need to know what you can do consciously. We need to know what we're working with. Naruto thought of the crimson scales, the concussive blast of energy. He had no idea how he'd done it. He had just willed it to happen. I don't know how to control it, he admitted. The words tasting like ash in his mouth. He hated admitting weakness. It just came out when I was about to die. A survival instinct, Kiba mused. Many powerful abilities manifest that way initially. Which means the best way to draw it out again is to put you in a situation where you need to survive, Rias concluded, a dangerous glint in her eyes. She stood up, her teacup forgotten. We'll use the training grounds. Kiba, Kaneko, you're with me. I want you to spar with Naruto. Do not hold back. I want to see the true face of the dragon. Naruto's head snapped up. A spar. Now. He was injured, exhausted. Running on nothing but stubborn pride. You can't be serious, he said, a growl in his voice. Perfectly serious, Rias replied, her smile returning, sharp as a razor's edge. There is no better way to learn your limits than by having them tested. Akeno, Issei, you'll observe with me from a safe distance. She turned and walked towards the double doors, her hips swaying with a confident, aristocratic rhythm. Come, Naruto, your first lesson is about to begin. Naruto stared after her, a mixture of anger and apprehension churning in his gut. This woman was infuriating. She was arrogant, demanding, and treated him like some fascinating new weapon she'd just acquired. But he also recognized the logic in her actions. He did need to understand this power. If it was going to be a part of him, he had to be its master, not the other way around. He drained his teacup in one gulp, the hot liquid doing little to quell the fire in his stomach. He placed the cup down on the table with a firm click and pushed himself to his feet. Every muscle protested, but he ignored them. He had never backed down from a challenge in his life, and he wasn't about to start now. He followed Rias through the doors, Kiba and Kaneko falling into step behind him. The hallway beyond was just as opulent as the lounge, but it ended abruptly at a single, massive door made of what looked like solid obsidian. Rias placed her palm on it, and intricate red lines, like glowing circuits, spread across its surface. The door swung inward silently, revealing not another room, but an endless, swirling expanse of purple and black energy. A pocket dimension. After you, Rias said, her voice echoing slightly in the vast emptiness. Naruto took a deep breath, the air humming with raw magical power. He squared his shoulders and stepped through the doorway, leaving the world of black tea and old books behind and entering a world of pure, unadulterated conflict. The training ground was a vast, barren plain of cracked gray earth under a perpetually twilight sky filled with swirling purple clouds. There was no sun, no moon, just a diffuse, eerie light that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The air was still and heavy, carrying a faint, metallic taste. Naruto stood in the center of the plain, his fists clenched at his sides. About 50 feet away from him, Kiba and Kaneko stood side by side. Their stances relaxed but ready. Kiba had his hand on the hilt of his sword, a classic European-style blade that now hung at his hip. Kaneko had simply cracked her knuckles. The sound unnaturally loud in the silence. Off to the side, perhaps 100 yards away, Rias, Akeno, and Issei stood on a small, raised platform of red energy that had materialized out of thin air. Rias was watching him with an intense, analytical gaze, like a scientist observing a particularly volatile experiment. "The rules are simple, Naruto," she called out, her voice carrying easily across the distance. "Kiba and Kaneko will attack you with the intent to incapacitate. Your goal is to defend yourself and, if you can, defeat them. There are no time limits. The match ends when I say it ends. Begin." The moment the word left her lips, Kiba blurred. He wasn't just fast. He was unnaturally, impossibly fast. One moment he was standing 50 feet away, the next he was right in front of Naruto. His sword already a silver arc cutting through the air, aimed at Naruto's neck. Naruto's combat instincts, forged in the crucible of 100 life or death battles, saved him. He didn't have time to think, to process. He just moved, throwing himself backward, tucking and rolling. The sword sliced through the air where his throat had been a split second before, the wind from its passage cold against his skin. He came up on one knee, his heart hammering against his ribs. That was faster than Rock Lee without his weights. Faster than the Raikage. It wasn't just physical speed, it was some kind of magic. A jutsu that let him move from one point to another in the blink of an eye. "Not bad," Kiba said, his gentle smile still in place, though his eyes were sharp with focus. "Your reflexes are excellent." Naruto didn't have time to reply. The ground beneath him shuddered. He glanced down and saw spiderweb cracks spreading from his feet. He threw himself to the side just as the ground erupted. A massive pillar of rock shooting upward with bone-shattering force. He landed awkwardly, his injured ribs screaming in protest. He looked over and saw Kaneko standing where he'd just been, her tiny fist extended. She hadn't moved from her spot. She had punched the ground, and the shockwave had traveled 50 feet to hit him. Her physical strength was monstrous, on par with Tsunade or Sakura. He was outmatched, completely and utterly. He had no ninjutsu, no clones, no Rasengan. His taijutsu was formidable, but against Kiba's impossible speed and Kaneko's absurd strength, it was useless. He was a shinobi without his tools, a warrior without his weapons. Kiba blurred again, appearing to Naruto's left, his sword a downward slash. At the same time, Kaneko stomped her foot, and a avenue of jagged rock spikes shot towards him from the right. They were coordinating, boxing him in, leaving him no room to maneuver. Desperation clawed at his throat. He was going to lose. He was going to be beaten, humiliated. By these two who served the woman who now owned his allegiance. The thought ignited a spark of defiance in his soul. No, he would not be a tool. He would not be a pet. He was Naruto Uzumaki, and he did not lose. He needed the power. The dragon. He closed his eyes, ignoring the twin attacks that were seconds from ending the fight. He reached inward, not for the shattered remnants of his chakra, but deeper. Into the roaring, fiery core of his being where the new power resided. He didn't try to command it. He pleaded with it. "Help me," he thought, a silent, desperate scream. "I need you." For a moment, there was nothing. Then, he felt it. A slow, ancient stirring. The serpent was waking up. A voice, or rather, 1,000 voices, whispered in the back of his mind, a chorus of ancient, draconic tongues. They spoke of fire and rage and dominion. "Let us out, little host. Let us burn." A wave of searing heat flooded his body. He opened his eyes, and they were no longer blue. They were molten gold, the pupils vertical slits like a reptile's. The crimson scales erupted across his skin, not just on his arms this time, but across his chest and back, forming a natural, flexible armor. A low, guttural growl escaped his lips. Kiba's sword slammed down onto his shoulder. Instead of flesh and bone, it met a solid wall of interlocking scales. A deafening clang rang out, and the sword, a magical blade of immense sharpness, bounced off, leaving not so much as a scratch. Kiba's eyes widened in disbelief. At the same time, the wave of rock spikes hit Naruto's right side. He didn't even try to dodge. He simply braced himself. The spikes shattered against his scaled flank, turning to dust and pebbles. He stood there, unharmed, between the two failed attacks. The power coursing through him was exhilarating. The pain from his injuries was gone, replaced by a feeling of absolute, unbreakable strength. He felt like he could shatter mountains with a punch, boil oceans with a breath. He turned his head slowly, his golden, slitted eyes fixing on Kiba. He saw the flicker of apprehension, the first hint of fear in the handsome boy's face. Good. Naruto moved. He wasn't as fast as Kiba's magical burst speed. But his raw, physical velocity was incredible. He closed the distance between them in a single, explosive step, the ground cracking under his feet. He swung his scaled fist, not at Kiba, but at the ground in front of him. The impact created a shockwave that ripped the plane apart. The earth buckled, a wave of rock and debris erupting outward. Kiba, caught completely off guard by the tactic, was thrown off his feet, his magical speed useless against the unstable terrain. Naruto didn't press the attack. He spun, his senses screaming a warning. Kaneko was in the air, a tiny, white-haired cannonball descending on him from above, her fist cocked back for a devastating blow. He looked up, his draconic eyes tracking her descent. He didn't block, he didn't dodge, he opened his mouth and roared. It was not just a sound. It was a physical force, a concussive blast of raw power-given voice. The air itself seemed to ripple. Kaneko, caught in the full force of the roar, was blasted backward. Her descent arrested, her attack scattered. She flew through the air, landing in a heap 100 yards away. Silence fell once more on the battlefield. Kiba was picking himself up, his sword held defensively. Kaneko was slowly getting to her feet, shaking her head as if to clear it. They were both staring at him with a newfound respect, and a healthy dose of fear. Yuto stood in the center of the devastation he had wrought, his chest heaving, the crimson scales shimmering with latent power. The whispers in his head were louder now, a triumphant chorus urging him to finish it. To show them the true meaning of a dragon's wrath. He took a step towards Kiba, his hand crackling with crimson energy. That's enough. Rias's voice cut through the haze of battlelust in his mind. It was calm, but held an unmistakable note of command. Naruto paused, turning to look at her. The platform had drifted closer. Rias was smiling, a look of utter fascination on her face. Akeno looked intrigued, her playful smile wider than ever. Issei just looked terrified. The match is over, Rias declared. A magnificent display, Naruto. Truly magnificent. The moment she declared the end of the fight, the power in his veins began to recede. The golden glow faded from his eyes, returning them to their normal blue. The scales sank back beneath his skin, the process feeling like 1,000 needles being withdrawn at once. The pain of his injuries returned with a vengeance, and a wave of exhaustion so profound it was dizzying washed over him. His knees buckled, and this time, he couldn't stop himself from falling. He collapsed onto the cracked earth, his vision swimming, his body screaming in protest. The last thing he saw before he blacked out was Rias Grimori's face leaning over him. Her crimson hair framing her face like a halo of fire, her eyes shining with the thrill of discovery. He woke up slowly, the world coming back to him in fuzzy, disconnected pieces. He was lying on something soft. The smell of antiseptic and clean linen filled his nostrils. He blinked his eyes open and found himself staring at a high, ornate ceiling. He was in a bedroom, lying in a massive, four-poster bed with silk sheets. He sat up, his body aching but noticeably better than before. His ribs felt bruised, not broken, and the deep, throbbing pain was gone. He looked down and saw that his tattered shirt had been removed. And his torso was wrapped in clean, white bandages. I see you're finally awake. He looked towards the source of the voice. Rias was sitting in a plush armchair near the window, a book resting in her lap. Sunlight streamed in through the window behind her, making her crimson hair glow. She was wearing the Kuo Academy girl's uniform, a simple yet elegant OU. TFIT that she somehow managed to make look like royal attire. How long was I out? He asked, his voice raspy. A little over a day, she replied, closing her book and setting it aside. You sustained significant internal injuries. Your body's natural healing ability is remarkable, but Akeno and I used some of our magic to speed up the process. You should be back to full strength by tomorrow. He swung his legs over the side of the bed, testing his weight. He was still sore, but the debilitating weakness was gone. Where are we? This is the main clubroom building, Rias explained. The room you first saw is just the lounge. This is one of the private suites upstairs. You'll be staying here for the time being. It's the most secure location in town. He stood up, walking over to the window. It overlooked the sprawling campus of Kuo Academy, the green lawns and pristine buildings looking peaceful and idyllic under the afternoon sun. It was hard to believe that this tranquil scene was the epicenter of a hidden world of devils, monsters, and ancient powers. "So," he said, not turning from the window. "Did I pass your test?" He heard her stand and walk towards him. "You exceeded my wildest expectations," she said, her voice soft, standing just behind him. "The sheer, raw power you command is unlike anything I have ever seen. It's not demonic, it's not holy, it's elemental, primordial, the power of a true dragon." He turned to face her. "And the voices, the whispers in my head when I use it." Rias's expression grew serious. "That is more concerning. It could be a number of things. A genetic memory, the echo of your ancestors. Or it could be a curse, a sentience tied to your bloodline. We will need to investigate it carefully. Unleashing that power without understanding its source is incredibly dangerous." She stepped closer, reaching out a hand and gently touching his chest, right over his heart. Her touch was cool, and sent a strange jolt through him. "When you fought, I felt your life force. It burned like a star. But there was a darkness intertwined with it, a rage that wanted to consume everything. You have to learn to control that, Naruto. You have to be the master of the dragon. Not the other way around." Her words resonated with something Kurama had told him long ago, about the need to control the Kyuubi's hatred lest it consume him. This was the same, but different. More personal. This power wasn't a separate entity sealed inside him. It was him. He met her gaze, and for the first time, he saw past the arrogant noble. He saw a leader burdened with responsibility. A girl his own age who carried the weight of a powerful and ancient family on her shoulders. He saw a flicker of something else, too. A loneliness that mirrored his own. "I know," he said, his voice quiet. "And I will." A comfortable silence settled between them. It was broken by a knock on the door. Akeno entered, carrying a tray with food. Era, I'm glad to see our guest is awake," she said, her ever-present smile in place. "The president was so worried about you." Rias immediately snatched her hand back from Naruto's chest, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. "I was simply assessing his condition, Akeno." "Of course, President," Akeno said, her smile widening as she placed the tray on a nearby table. "I brought you some lunch, Naruto-kun. You need to eat to regain your strength." The food smelled incredible, and Naruto's stomach rumbled loudly, reminding him he hadn't eaten in what felt like days. He sat at the table and dug in, his usual table manners forgotten. The food was just as good as it smelled. Over the next few days, a strange sort of routine began to form. Naruto would spend his mornings in light training, not sparring, but meditating, trying to reach the source of his draconic power in a controlled state. He would focus on the feeling, the heat in his blood, trying to draw out just a small fraction of it. The first few times he tried, he was met with only the angry, demanding whispers. But slowly, painstakingly, he began to make progress. He learned to manifest a single scale on the back of his hand, then a dozen. He learned to create a small, harmless flicker of crimson energy in his palm. It was exhausting work, mentally and physically, but it was progress. His afternoons were spent in the clubroom lounge, where Rias and the others tried to educate him on the new world he found himself in. He learned about the great war between the three factions, devils, angels, and fallen angels, that had decimated all sides and led to the current, fragile truce. He learned about the different devil families, the 72 pillars, and the complex political landscape of the underworld. It wasn't a lecture, it was conversations. Kiba would talk out the fallen angels while polishing his sword. Akeno would mention the hierarchies of heaven while brewing tea. Kaneko would occasionally offer a blunt, surprisingly insightful comment before going back to her snacks. Issei, for all his perverted antics and general foolishness, would ask the same simple questions Naruto was thinking, making the complex topics easier to understand. Through it all, Rias would preside, guiding the conversation, answering his more difficult questions with a surprising depth of knowledge. He learned that she was the heiress to the Grimoire clan, one of the most powerful and respected families in the underworld. He learned that she was adored by her people, known for her brilliant strategic mind and her unusually kind and compassionate nature for a devil. So learned that she was engaged to be married. He found out by accident, overhearing Issei complaining about it to Kiba. It's just not fair. Issei whined, sprawled on the sofa. How can the president be engaged to some rich pretty boy jerk she doesn't even like? It was an arrangement made by the elders, Issei, Kiba replied calmly, not looking up from the book he was reading. Politics are often cruel. Rias Sama's freedom is a small price to pay for the stability of the Grimoire clan. Naruto felt a strange, unpleasant knot form in his stomach. He didn't understand why the thought of Rias being engaged to someone else bothered him so much. He barely knew her. She was arrogant and demanding. But she had also saved him. She had given him a place to stay, a purpose. She had looked at him and seen not a monster or a weapon, but potential. Later that evening, he found her alone on the balcony outside the lounge, staring up at the moon. The night was cool, and she had her arms wrapped around herself. He walked up and stood beside her, leaning on the railing. For a long time, neither of them spoke. I heard you're engaged, he said finally, his voice quiet. Rias didn't seem surprised. She let out a small, humorless laugh. Is there anyone in the supernatural world who hasn't heard? Rias Grimoire, the crimson-haired ruined princess, betrothed to Riser Phoenix of the House of Phoenix. She said the name with a quiet, venomous disdain. You don't want to marry him, Naruto stated. It wasn't a question. I would rather burn in holy fire, she replied, her voice tight with suppressed anger. Riser is an arrogant, lecherous fool who sees me as nothing more than a trophy. A prize to be won. He values my name, my power, my body. He cares nothing for the person attached to them. The words struck a chord deep inside Naruto. It was the same way the villagers of Konoha had treated him. They saw the Jinchuriki, the container of the Kyuubi. They didn't see Naruto Uzumaki. He and this powerful, noble-born devil girl were more alike than he had realized. They were both trapped in cages built by their power. Why don't you just say no? He asked. You're strong. You have your peerage. You could fight it. Rias finally turned to look at him, a sad smile on her face. It's not that simple, Naruto. My family, the Grimoire clan, we are known for our love and compassion. It is our greatest strength, but also our greatest weakness in the cutthroat world of devil politics. The old houses, the ones who value pure blood lineage above all else, they see us as soft. This marriage is meant to solidify our position, to create an alliance with the powerful House of Phoenix. If I refuse, I risk shaming my family, destabilizing our political power, and showing weakness to our enemies. So you're just going to give up? He asked, a hint of challenge in his tone. You're just going to let them decide your life for you? Her eyes flashed with a familiar fire. I have not given up, she said, her voice sharp. I have delayed, I have argued, I have used every political and personal tool at my disposal to try and find a way out. But my time is running out. Riser is growing impatient. They stood in silence again, the weight of her words hanging between them. Naruto looked at her, at the proud set of her shoulders, the defiance in her eyes, the faint trembling of her hands. He saw the weight of the world on her, and he felt a sudden, fierce surge of protectiveness. She had offered him a place to belong. Now, he wanted to offer her a way out. There's always a way out, he said, his voice low but firm. Sometimes, you just have to break down the door instead of looking for the key. Rias looked at him, a strange expression on her face. It was a mixture of surprise, gratitude, and something else he couldn't quite name. Perhaps you're right, she whispered. Before she could say more, the air in the clubroom behind them crackled with magical energy. A glowing, intricate magic circle, emblazoned with a fiery bird-like crest, materialized in the center of the room. A wave of oppressive heat washed over them. Rias's body went rigid. Her face, which had softened in their conversation, became a cold, hard mask of aristocratic disdain. He's here, she hissed. From the center of the magic circle, a pillar of fire erupted, harmlessly scorching the air before receding to reveal a group of figures. At their head was a young man with blonde hair, styled in a way that probably took hours. He wore flamboyant, expensive-looking red and gold clothing and carried himself with an air of insufferable arrogance. His eyes, cold and assessing, swept the room before landing on Rias. My dearest Rias, he said, his voice smooth and oily. How long you have kept your beloved riser waiting. It is time to come home. A group of girls, all dressed in matching maid-like outfits, giggled and fawned behind him. His peerage. Rias stepped back into the room from the balcony, Naruto right behind her. Riser, she said, her voice dripping with ice. Your presence is neither welcome nor required. Riser's smile didn't falter, but his eyes hardened. Now, my love. Is that any way to speak to your fiancé? The wedding preparations are nearly complete. The elders are growing impatient. It is time to end this little game of rebellion. He took a step towards her, his gaze finally falling on Naruto. His eyes narrowed, taking in Naruto's presence, his casual proximity to Rias. And who is this? A new pet you've picked up. Naruto felt the dragon in his blood stir, awakened by the maw. En's arrogance and the possessive way he looked at Rias. A low growl rumbled in his chest. Riser laughed, a condescending, unpleasant sound. It growls. How amusing. You should learn to keep your mongrels on a tighter leash, Rias. That was it. Naruto took a step forward, his hands clenching into fists, a flicker of crimson energy dancing in his eyes. But Rias put a hand on his arm, stopping him. He looked at her. Her face was a mask of cold fury, but her eyes conveyed a clear message. Not yet. Not like this. She turned her attention back to Riser, her voice ringing with power. He is not my pet. He is an ally of the House of Gremory, and he is under my protection. You will show him the proper respect. Riser simply sneered. An ally. A no-name human with no demonic energy to speak of. You grow desperate, my dear. No matter. He will be disposed of soon enough. He clapped his hands together, a look of finality on his face. But we are getting off topic. I am not here to argue. I am here to collect my bride. He made to step forward again, but was stopped by the sudden appearance of another magic circle, this one bearing the Gremory crest. A stately, gray-haired woman in a head maid's uniform appeared. It was Graphia Lucifuge, wife of the Devil King Searsex Lucifer, and the strongest queen in the underworld. Lord Riser, she said, her voice polite but firm, her eyes like chips of ice. My master, Searsex Lucifer, has authorized me to mediate this dispute. Riser scowled. There is no dispute. The marriage contract is absolute. My lady, Rias Gremory, has filed a formal objection, Graphia stated calmly. Under the ancient rules of our society, such a dispute, when it cannot be resolved through negotiation, can be settled through a rating game. Lord Gremory and my master have both approved this petition. A slow, predatory smile spread across Riser's face. A rating game. My dear Rias, you wish to pit your little group of inexperienced children against my peerage. The peerage that has already seen battle and emerged victorious. He laughed out loud. Very well. Riser will accept this foolish challenge. It will be amusing to watch you squirm. Graphia nodded, unfazed. The official challenge is accepted. The game will take place in 10 days' time, in a pocket dimension of my master's creation. The winner takes all. If you win, Lord Riser, Lady Rias will marry you without further protest. If Lady Rias wins, the engagement will be nullified. Are these terms acceptable? Perfectly. Riser sneered. He shot Rias a final, contemptuous look. Enjoy your last 10 days of freedom, my love. With that, he and his peerage were consumed by another pillar of fire, and vanished. The room was silent, the oppressive heat slowly fading. Graphia gave Rias a small, most imperceptible nod before disappearing in her own magic circle. The moment she was gone, Rias's iron composure shattered. She stumbled back, her hand going to her forehead, her breathing suddenly ragged. Akeno was at her side instantly. A comforting hand on her shoulder. He's so vile, Rias whispered, her voice trembling with a mixture of anger and despair. Issei, Kiba, and Kaneko gathered around, their expressions grim. They knew what this meant. They were going up against a seasoned, powerful opponent. The odds were stacked impossibly against them. Naruto looked at the dejected group, then at Rias, who looked smaller and more vulnerable than he had ever seen her. He remembered her words on the balcony, about being trapped, about having no way out. He remembered his own response. Sometimes, you just have to break down the door. He stepped into the center of the group, his presence drawing all their eyes. He looked at each of them. At Issei's fear, Kiba's resolve, Kaniko's stoicism, Akino's forced smile. Then he looked at Rias, and his blue eyes were as clear and determined as the sky after a storm. 10 days, he said, his voice calm and steady, cutting through the atmosphere of despair. That's more than enough time. Rias looked up at him, her eyes wide and questioning. Naruto. He gave her a confident, fanged grin, a flash of the untamable, knucklehead ninja he had always been. It was the first genuine smile they had ever seen from him. This guy wants a fight, Naruto said, cracking his knuckles, a faint shimmer of crimson scales flashing over his skin for a brief second. Let's give him one. Chapter 2 End. Chapter 3. Trial by Hellfire. The 10 days that followed Riser Phoenix's challenge were a suffocating mixture of frantic energy and quiet dread. The Occult Research Club, once a place of relaxed conversation and tea, had transformed into a war room. Tactical maps of the Kuo Academy replica were spread across the low table, weighed down by teacups and half-eaten snacks. The air, usually scented with Akino's brewing, now carried the sharp, metallic tang of ozone from her practice bolts and the faint scent of Naruto's blood from sparring sessions that pushed him far past his limits. Rias stood before them, a pillar of calm authority, but Naruto could see the strain in the rigid set of her shoulders and the faint shadows under her eyes. She hadn't been sleeping well. The weight of her peerage's safety, of her own future, rested squarely on her. Riser's strategy is predictable, she said, her voice crisp as she pointed to a spot on the map marked with the Phoenix crest. He will meet us head-on in the schoolyard. He believes in overwhelming force. His queen, Yubeluna, is a bomber with immense destructive power. His knight and rook are both highly durable front-liners. He will attempt to crush us with a single, decisive push. She then laid out her own plan. A defensive formation. Kiba and Issei would hold the line, Kaniko would provide support. And Akino would bombard them from the air while Rias looked for an opening to take out Riser herself. It was a sound, logical strategy, the kind one might read in a devil's military textbook. It was also, in Naruto's opinion, guaranteed to fail. He remained silent until she finished, letting her command her team. But when she looked at him, awaiting his input, he didn't hold back. You'll lose, he said, his voice flat. The others looked at him in shock. Issei opened his mouth to protest, but Naruto's gaze, hard as flint, silenced him. Rias's eyes narrowed. Explain. Your plan is based on a direct confrontation of power, Naruto said, stepping forward and sweeping a hand over the map. You're playing his game. You've already admitted his pieces are more experienced and that he has an immortal king. A direct fight is a battle of attrition, and against an immortal, that's a battle you can't win. You're fighting like devils. You need to fight like shinobi. And what does that mean? Kiba asked, his curiosity piqued. It means we don't play fair, Naruto replied, a dangerous glint in his eye. He picked up a pawn-shaped marker from the side of the board. The first rule of UN conventional warfare is to never let your enemy fight the battle they want to fight. Riser expects a noble clash in the open. He expects us to stand and fight. So, we do the opposite. He swept all the Grimoire pieces off the map. We don't meet him in the schoolyard. In fact, we're not there at all when the match starts. We hide. We use the terrain. This entire school is our weapon. He tapped the gymnasium. Kaniko, you don't support the line. You bring the roof down on his rooks. You separate them, disorient them. He then moved his finger to the old school building. Kiba, you don't hold a line. You become a ghost. Your speed is your greatest asset. You will harass their flanks, take out his bishops who will be trying to support from the rear, and then vanish before they can retaliate. You are not a soldier. You are an assassin. His gaze fell on Akino. And you are not artillery. You are a storm. Your lightning isn't just for damage. You can use it to create a smokescreen of ionized air, blocking their magical sensors. You can herd them, force them into kill zones. You control the flow of the entire battle from above. He looked at Rias. This isn't a duel, it's a hunt. We dismantle his peerage piece by piece, sow chaos and confusion, and break their morale. We take away his support, isolate him. And only then, when he is alone and enraged, do we face the king. The room was silent. Rias's peerage stared at Naruto, then at the empty map, their minds racing to visualize the chaotic, fluid battle he had just described. It was a brutal, pragmatic, and utterly ruthless strategy. It was also brilliant. Rias stared at Naruto, her blue-green eyes wide. He had just deconstructed years of formal military training in less than a minute and proposed a plan that was both terrifying and undeniably effective. He wasn't just a powerhouse, he was a commander. Very well, Naruto, she said, a slow, dangerous smile spreading across her face. It seems we will be fighting your way. The days became a blur of intense, specialized training. Naruto pushed them relentlessly, forcing them to think outside the confines of their established roles. He sparred with Kiba in the dense, holographic forest behind the school, teaching him not just to use his speed for direct attacks, but for evasion and misdirection. Faster isn't always better, Naruto grunted, deflecting a lightning quick sword strike with a newly scaled forearm. Kiba had aimed for his chest, but Naruto had shifted at the last second, taking the blow on his armored limb. You move in straight lines. It's predictable. Use the environment. A feint to the left, a burst of speed behind him, a strike from the shadows. Make him guess where you are, and by the time he guesses right, he's already dead. Kiba, a prodigy of swordsmanship, absorbed the lessons like a sponge. His movements became less direct, more fluid. He started incorporating feints, backsteps, and environmental attacks, using his speed to appear and disappear. A blonde phantom armed with a holy sword. Naruto worked with Kaneko in the weight training room, but not on lifting. He had her practice striking a single point on a massive block of reinforced concrete. Don't just hit it, he instructed, watching her carefully. Feel the energy. Focus all your strength, your entire being, into your fist, into a single, infinitesimal point. You're not trying to shatter the block. You're trying to send a shockwave through its heart. After hours of practice, her punches, which had once just created large craters, now sent spiderweb cracks through the entire structure. She learned to project her power, to turn a simple punch into a ranged, terrain-altering attack. His own training was a private, internal war. He would retreat to the pocket dimension, the only place he felt he could safely let go and meditate. He would reach for the draconic power, not with desperation as he had in the spar, but with a calm, focused will. The whispers were always there, a seductive chorus at the edge of his consciousness. Riser Phoenix is a creature of fire, they would hiss, their voices like grinding stones. But we are the true flame. We are the fire that melts mountains and boils the seas. Give in. Let us show you what it is to burn. A single breath from us would turn that gilded cage to ash. No, Naruto would grit out, sweat beading on his forehead as he fought the urge. I control you. You don't control me. He focused on the specifics. He practiced molding the crimson energy, not into wild blasts, but into controlled forms. He managed to create a small, sputtering jet of flame from his mouth, a primitive but promising dragon's breath. He focused on partial transformations, forcing scales to appear only on his knuckles to reinforce a punch, or on his shins to block a kick. Each small victory was a monumental effort of will, a battle won against the raging inferno in his own blood. The hardest part was the exhaustion. Every use of the draconic power, no matter how small, left him feeling drained, as if it were consuming his very life force. But he pushed on, driven by a stubborn refusal to fail, and by the promise he saw in Rias Grimori's eyes. The night before the raiding game, a heavy, anxious silence had fallen over the clubroom. The maps were put away, the equipment stored. There was nothing left to do but wait. Kiba was silently meditating. Issei was trying, and failing, to look brave, and Kaneko was methodically eating her way through an entire family-sized bag of chips. Naruto found Rias standing on the same balcony, where they had spoken of her engagement. She was staring out at the darkened campus, the moonlight casting a silver sheen on her crimson hair. Nervous? He asked, coming to stand beside her. She didn't turn. I am responsible for them, she said, her voice barely a whisper. Kiba, Akeno, Kaneko, Issei, they are my precious family. I am leading them into a battle against an opponent who will not hesitate to injure them, to humiliate them, all for my sake. They chose to follow you, Naruto said simply. They're not fighting for you. They're fighting with you. There's a difference. Is there? She asked. A bitter edge to her voice. If any of them are seriously hurt tomorrow, it will be my fault. Perhaps I should have just accepted the marriage. It would have been the safer path. Naruto was silent for a moment. He thought back to a time that felt like a lifetime ago. The night before his final match in the Chunin exams against Neji. The crushing weight of destiny, the fear of failure. The feeling that he was fighting for something bigger than himself. Before I fought a guy named Neji, he said, his voice distant. He was a prodigy. Everyone thought he was unbeatable. He told me that fate was decided at birth. That a failure like me could never defeat a genius like him. He had everyone convinced. He even had me convinced, for a second. Rias turned to look at him, her intent. Ion captured by the raw honesty in his voice. I was terrified, Naruto admitted, a wry smile touching his lips. I thought about running, but then I remembered all the people who believed in me, even when I didn't believe in myself. Iruka-sensei, Kakashi-sensei, Pervy Sage. I remembered the promise I made to a girl, Hinata, that I would win. I wasn't just fighting for myself. I was fighting for them. For their faith in me. He met Rias's gaze, his blue eyes unwavering. That fear you're feeling, it's not a weakness. It means you have something precious to fight for. It's the source of your true strength. He reached out, his hand hovering for a moment before he gently placed it on her shoulder. Your peerage believes in you. They would follow you into hell itself. I've seen it in their eyes. They aren't afraid. He squeezed her shoulder gently. So don't you be afraid either. Trust in them. Trust in the plan. And trust in me. He looked her directly in the eyes, his voice dropping to a low, firm promise that carried the weight of an unbreakable vow. I won't let you lose. Rias stared at him, her breath catching in her throat. In his eyes, she saw no doubt, no fear, only an absolute, unshakable conviction. It was a strength that went beyond his draconic power. It was the strength of his spirit. A tear she hadn't realized was forming traced a path down her cheek. She didn't wipe it away. For the first time in days. The crushing weight on her shoulders felt a little lighter. Thank you, Naruto, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. The transition to the battlefield was instantaneous and jarring. One moment they were in the teleportation room, the next they were standing on the familiar grounds of Kuo Academy, but the sky above was a swirling, artificial tapestry of purple and gold. A female voice, smooth and electronic, echoed from an unseen source. The rating game between the House of Grimoire and the House of Phoenix will now begin. Across the sprawling schoolyard, Riser and his peerage materialized in a pillar of fire. He was wearing a ridiculously ostentatious golden armor and had a smirk plastered on his face. So, you actually showed up, my dear Rias, he called out. His voice dripping with condescension. Are you ready to accept your inevitable defeat and join your husband? He gestured to his 15 pieces, all of whom looked battle-hardened and utterly confident. My peerage is a legion. Yours is a book club. This will be over quickly. Rias took a deep breath, her eyes scanning her own team. Hiba's hand rested on his sword. Kaneko cracked her knuckles. Akano smiled her dangerous smile. Issei activated his boosted gear, the red gauntlet glowing on his arm. They all looked to her, then to Naruto. Naruto stepped forward, his gaze fixed on Riser. He didn't shout. He didn't posture. He just spoke, his voice carrying across the field with blunt, dismissive clarity. Are we gonna talk all day, or are we gonna fight? Riser's smirk faltered, replaced by a flash of anger. Insolent mongrel, you will be the first to fall. My rooks, crush them. Two massive, heavily armored girls from Riser's team charged forward, their footsteps shaking the ground. Now, Rias commanded, but her team was already gone. In the blink of an eye, they had vanished, melting into the shadows of the school buildings. The two rooks skidded to a halt in the empty courtyard, looking around in confusion. From his perch on the school roof, Naruto watched as his plan unfolded. Riser's forces, expecting a direct confrontation, were momentarily thrown into chaos. Find them, Riser shrieked, his arrogance turning to fury. I want them found and broken. His team split up, entering the school buildings in small groups. It was exactly what Naruto had wanted. They had surrendered their advantage of numbers and stepped into his trap. The first scream echoed from the gymnasium. Naruto glanced over and saw the roof of the gym sag inward before collapsing in a cloud of dust and debris. A moment later, Kaneko emerged from the side door, dusting off her hands. 2 of Riser's pawns and 1 of his rooks were retired from the game. 1 rook and 2 pawns from the House of Phoenix, retired. A flash of lightning illuminated the windows of the main school building, followed by a cry of pain. Akeno was at work. Riser stared at the collapsing gym, his face a mask of disbelief. What is this trickery? This is not how nobles fight. Then maybe you shouldn't be fighting nobles, Naruto muttered to himself. He saw Kiba, a blur of motion in the courtyard below, engage a group of 3 pawns. He didn't fight them head-on. He zipped between them, a slash here, a feint there, forcing them to turn on each other, their movements clumsy and slow compared to his ethereal grace. Within seconds, all 3 were disarmed and retired. 3 pawns from the House of Phoenix, retired. The battle was a masterpiece of controlled chaos. Riser's forces were being picked apart, unable to form a cohesive front. Issei, surprisingly, was proving to be a formidable distraction. His boosted gear allowed him to build up power, making him durable enough to withstand blows. That should have taken him out instantly. He would charge in, draw the attention of several pieces, tank their hits, and then Kiba or Akeno would strike from the shadows. It was working. They had talk, and out half of Riser's peerage without a single loss. But Naruto knew the easy part was over. He scanned the battlefield, looking for the biggest threat. Yubeluna, Riser's queen, a woman with short purple hair and a cruel smile. She had taken to the air, unleashing massive fireballs that were leveling entire sections of the school. She was keeping Akeno pinned down and preventing the rest of the team from grouping up. She had to be dealt with. Naruto's eyes narrowed. It was his turn. He leapt from the roof, landing silently in the shadow of a cherry blossom tree. He began to move, a silent predator stalking his prey. Yubeluna was focused on Akeno, trading bolts of lightning for explosions of fire. She didn't notice the figure on the ground below, weaving through the chaos towards her. He found his spot directly beneath her, in the crater from one of her own attacks. He crouched low, his muscles coiling. He reached for the dragon's power, but with focus, with intent. Let us burn her from the sky. The voices screamed. Not yet. Just give me strength. Give me legs. A surge of power flooded his limbs. Crimson scales flashed across his calves and thighs. He bent his knees and jumped. He didn't just jump. He exploded upward. The ground beneath him shattered as he shot into the sky like a cannonball, closing the 100-foot distance to Yubeluna in a matter of seconds. Her eyes wide, and in shock as he appeared before her in midair. She had no time to erect a barrier. She had no time to do anything but watch as he cocked his fist back. He had baited her. He had taken a calculated risk. While she was distracted, Kiba, on his signal, had taken out Riser's final bishop. The support piece that would have warned her. Naruto's fist, now covered in interlocking crimson scales, slammed into her stomach. The blow was solid, brutal. All the air left her lungs in a whoosh. He didn't stop there. He grabbed her by the front of her uniform, arresting her fall, and threw her downward. She crashed into the roof of the science wing with enough force to shatter every tile. Queen from the House of Phoenix, retired. The announcement was a death knell for Riser's hopes. The battlefield fell silent. His remaining pieces, seeing their powerful queen defeated, lost their will to fight. Within minutes, they were rounded up and retired. Now, only one opponent remained. Naruto landed in the center of the devastated courtyard, the scales on his body receding. Rias and the rest of her peerage gathered around him, battered and bruised, but victorious. They stood as one, facing a lone figure. Riser Phoenix stood amidst the wreckage, his golden armor scuffed, his arrogant expression gone, replaced by one of pure, unadulterated rage. Insolent worms, he screamed, his body bursting into brilliant orange flames. You think you have won? I am a Phoenix. I am immortal. I will burn you all to ash. He charged, a blur of fire and fury. Kiba and Kaneko moved to intercept, but Riser swatted them aside like flies. His raw power amplified by his rage. He appeared before Rias, his hand wreathed in fire, reaching for her throat. You are mine, he roared. A wall of crimson scales intercepted his attack. Naruto had moved to stand in front of Rias, his arm taking the full force of the fiery blow. The heat was intense, his scales glowing cherry red, but they held. "You're not touching her," Naruto growled, his eyes glowing gold. Riser recoiled, his hands smoking. This is your fault. I will incinerate you." He unleashed a torrent of fire, a massive wave of golden flames that engulfed Naruto completely. Rias screamed his name, but when the fire cleared, Naruto was still standing, his entire upper body now covered in crimson scales, his clothes burned away to reveal the draconic armor beneath. He was panting, the effort of withstanding the attack immense, but he was unharmed. "My turn," he snarled. What followed was not a fight. It was a beatdown. Riser was powerful, but he was a brawler, relying on his immortality to win. Naruto was a warrior. He ducked under a wild swing, delivering a precise, scaled elbow to Riser's ribs that cracked his armor. He sidestepped a blast of fire, sweeping Riser's legs out from under him. Every time Riser regenerated, Naruto was there, striking him down again, his attacks relentless and brutal. But it wasn't enough. No matter how many times he knocked Riser down, the Phoenix flames would heal him, and he would rise again, laughing. "You see," Riser cackled, a broken arm snapping back into place. "It's useless. You cannot defeat me." Naruto backed away, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The draconic power was draining him fast. He was right. He couldn't kill him. Rias and the others watched, their hearts sinking. After all their work, all their strategy, it was coming down to an unbeatable opponent. Despair began to creep back in. Rias looked at Riser's unending flames, then at Naruto's panting form. It was hopeless. Then she saw Naruto look at her, and in his golden, slitted eyes, she saw not despair, but a fierce, burning intelligence. He gave her a subtle, almost imperceptible nod. He had a plan. Her heart leapt with a desperate hope. She remembered his promise. "Trust in me." Naruto stood beside her, his voice a low whisper only she could hear. "His regeneration isn't infinite. It consumes his demonic power. We can't kill him, but we can overwhelm him. We can burn him out. One shot, everything we have." Rias didn't hesitate. She knew what he was asking. To pour every last drop of her power into a single, all-or-nothing attack. She nodded, her resolve hardening. She began to gather her power. A terrifying, chaotic energy swirled around her, the air crackling with the power of destruction. A sphere of black and red energy, darker than night, formed between her hands. At the same time, Naruto took a deep breath. He held his right hand out, palm up. The whispers in his head reached a fever pitch, screaming at him to unleash the dragon. To let them consume everything. He ignored them. He focused, molding the raw, chaotic energy not into a wild blast, but into a controlled, contained form. A spear of pure, golden draconic energy, swirling with immense power, materialized in his hand. It looked almost holy, a stark contrast to the destructive aura radiating from Rias. Riser watched them, a flicker of genuine fear in his eyes for the first time. "What are you doing? This is the end, Riser," Rias shouted, her voice ringing with power. They moved as one. They pushed their attacks forward, not separately, but together. The crimson-black sphere of destruction met the golden spear of draconic life. For a moment, they struggled against each other, two opposing, fundamental forces of the universe. Then, they merged. Destruction and life. Annihilation and creation. The crimson and the gold twisted together, forming a spiraling vortex of energy that defied all logic. It was beautiful and terrifying. A raw display of cosmic power that made the very foundations of the pocket dimension tremble. The vortex shot forward, silent and inexorable. It hit Riser. There was no grand explosion. There was only light. Riser screamed as the dual energies washed over him. His flames of regeneration flared, fighting desperately against the onslaught, but they were like a candle in a hurricane. The power of destruction unmade him, while the draconic energy overwhelmed his life force. His immortality was being burned away, consumed by a power far greater than his own. When the light faded, Riser Phoenix was on his knees, his armor gone. His body smoking and trembling. He was alive, but his power was completely drained. He looked up at them, his eyes wide with terror and disbelief. He was broken. All ECES from the House of Phoenix have been retired. The winner is the House of Grimoire. The electronic voice echoed in the sudden, profound silence. It was over. They had won. A wave of dizziness washed over Rias as the adrenaline left her. She stumbled, her legs giving out. A strong arm wrapped around her waist, holding her steady. It was Naruto. The scales had receded, leaving him pale and covered in sweat, but he was smiling. A tired, bruised, but utterly triumphant grin. She looked at him, at the boy who had fallen from another world, the boy who carried a dragon in his blood. He had saved her. He had given her back her future. Her eyes welled up with tears, not of sadness, but of overwhelming, profound gratitude. And something more, something deeper and warmer that spread through her chest like a gentle fire. She didn't say thank you. The words felt too small, too inadequate for what he had just done. Instead, she leaned her head against his shoulder, her exhaustion and relief washing over her in a dizzying wave. He held her, his presence a solid, reassuring anchor in the swirling aftermath of the battle. In the quiet of their shared victory, a bond that had been forged in EGY and desperation was now sealed in fire and triumph. Chapter 3 End. 4. Chapter 4. Echoes of the Past, Whispers of War. The victory party in the Occult Research Club was a chaotic, joyous affair. For the first time since Naruto's arrival, the opulent lounge felt less like a devil's den and more like a teenager's messy living room after a major win. Issei, perched on the arm of the sofa, was Laudel. Why recounting an exaggerated version of his role in the battle, gesticulating wildly with a piece of cake. Kaneko, in her usual armchair, was surrounded by a small mountain of empty pastry boxes, a rare, contented smile on her face. Kiba and Akino were engaged in a quiet conversation by the window, but the relaxed set of their shoulders and the genuine warmth in their expressions spoke volumes. Naruto sat on the sofa, a half-eaten slice of strawberry shortcake on a plate in his lap. He felt a strange sense of peace settle over him. The ache in his muscles was a dull, satisfying throb, a physical reminder of the victory they had earned. He watched the scene, a small, genuine smile on his face. This chaotic, mismatched group of devils, they felt a little like home. Like a new, bizarre version of Team 7. Rias sat beside him, nursing a cup of tea, her earlier tension completely gone. She was radiant, her laughter ringing through the room as she listened to Issei's boasting. Every so often, her eyes would meet Naruto's, and she would give him a look that was a mixture of gratitude, admiration, and something softer, more personal. A silent understanding passed between them, a shared secret. Tea woven in the crucible of their combined attack. I still can't believe we did it, Issei said, his voice filled with awe. We actually beat a high-class devil and his entire peerage. We did it, Beck. Naruto gave us a strategy that didn't involve running head first into a meat grinder, Kiba corrected gently, a grateful nod in Naruto's direction. But Naruto-kun's brute force was quite the spectacle as well, Akino added. Her eyes twinkling. I don't think I've ever seen a Phoenix look so terrified. Naruto just shrugged, a faint blush on his cheeks. We all did our part. The plan wouldn't have worked if you guys hadn't executed it perfectly. It was true. He had provided the framework, but they had brought it to life. Their trust in him, in his radical strategy, had been absolute. It was a feeling he had missed more than he realized. Rias placed her hand on his, her fingers cool against his skin. The casual touch sent a jolt through him, far more potent than any of Akino's lightning. He's right, she said, her voice soft but clear enough for the whole room to hear. This victory belongs to all of us. As a team, as my family. The word, family, hung in the air, warm and solid. It resonated deep within Naruto's chest, filling a void he had carried for as long as he could remember. Just as the comfortable atmosphere reached its peak, it was shattered. Kiba, who had been smiling a moment before, suddenly went rigid. The teacup in his hand trembled, and his face paled, his expression twisting into one of pained recognition. Kiba, what's wrong? Rias asked, her voice sharp with concern. This feeling, Kiba whispered, his hand instinctively going to his side where his sword materialized in a shimmer of light. It's cold, sharp. I know this energy. He looked at Rias, his eyes dark with a grim certainty. There are holy swords in Kuo. The celebratory mood in the room evaporated instantly, replaced by a tense, chilling silence. Even Issei stopped his boasting, his face suddenly serious. Are you certain? Rias pressed, standing up, her demeanor shifting from relaxed friend to Grimoire heiress in a heartbeat. I'm positive, Kiba said, his voice tight. Quote, the Holy Sword Project, the energy of the Excalibur fragments. I would know it anywhere. There are multiple sources, scattered throughout the town. Naruto looked between them, piecing together the implications from their previous lessons. Holy swords were the weapons of the church, the sworn enemies of the devils. Their presence here, in territory governed by the Grimoire clan, was not just an intrusion, it was a provocation. It was the first tremor of an earthquake. The church wouldn't be so bold as to send exorcists into my territory without so much as a warning, Rias mused, her mind already shifting to strategy. Not unless they were rogue agents. Or it's not the church, Akeno finished, her playful smile gone, replaced by a cold, dangerous look. The fallen angels have been known to collect holy sword fragments for their own purposes. The name hung in the air, a dark cloud over their recent victory. Fallen angels, the third faction in the Great War, known for their ruthlessness and their disdain for the fragile peace. We need to investigate, Rias declared, her decision absolute. Immediately, Issei, Akeno, you'll patrol the West District. Kaneko, Kiba, the East. Report back the moment you find anything. Do not engage unless absolutely necessary. This could be a trap. Her peerage nodded, their expressions grim, and began to move. What about me? Naruto asked, getting to his feet. Rias turned to him. You'll be with me. Your senses are different from ours. You may notice things we would miss. She was right. As they moved through the darkening streets of Kuo town, Naruto realized he could feel it too. It wasn't a chakra signature, but a faint, sharp scent on the air, like cold steel and sterile faith. It was a subtle wrongness in the fabric of the world, and it set his teeth on edge. While Rias and the others relied on detecting demonic or holy energy, Naruto's heightened senses, a gift from his draconic blood, operated on a more primal level. Their investigation led them to a quiet residential neighborhood. The place reeked of that cold, holy scent. But there was something else, too. A faint smell of burnt feathers and ozone. Fallen angels, Naruto said, his voice low. He pointed to a utility pole. Look. Rias looked up. Embedded in the wood, almost invisible in the twilight, was a single black feather. It wasn't from a crow or a raven. It was too large, and it seemed to absorb the light around it. They're not even trying to hide their presence, Rias murmured, her expression hardening. This is a message. They continued their search, Naruto taking the lead. He ignored the magical traces Rias was trying to follow and focused on the physical world. He noticed a set of scuff marks on the pavement that indicated a brief struggle. He saw a single drop of blood, almost black under the streetlights, near a storm drain. He followed a trail not of magic, but of faint, disturbed dust patterns and the lingering scent of fear. His skills, honed by years of tracking and reconnaissance as a shinobi, were completely alien to Rias. She watched, fascinated, as he moved with a quiet, predatory grace, reading the story of the street in clues that were invisible to her. He was a hunter in his natural element. The trail led them to an abandoned warehouse district by the docks. The scent of holy steel and burnt feathers was overpowering here. As they rounded a corner, they saw them, a group of 3 figures in long, dark coats surrounding a fourth, who was kneeling on the ground. 2 of the standing figures had large, black feathered wings unfurled from their backs. Fallen angels. The third was a man in a priest's garb, laughing maniacally as he held a twisted, glowing sword to the throat of the kneeling figure, a terrified-looking nun. Excalibur's light is wasted on the weak. The priest cackled, but in the hands of a true warrior, under the glorious banner of Lord Kokobile, it will sing a song of righteous destruction. Freed, one of the fallen angels said. His voice bored. Enough theatrics. Kill the stray exorcist and let's go. We have other fragments to collect. Before the priest, freed, could obey, Rias stepped out from the shadows. That's far enough, she said, her voice ringing with authority. A red Grimoire magic circle glowed on the ground at her feet. This is the territory of the House of Grimoire. Your presence here is a violation of the treaty. State your purpose or be eliminated. The fallen angels turned, their expressions shifting from boredom to predatory interest. Well, Well, if it isn't the little Grimoire princess. The lead fallen said with a sneer. Playing hero in your own backyard. Fried's eyes, wide and unhinged, lit up with a psychotic glee. A devil, a beautiful, high-class devil bitch. It's my lucky day. I get to purify some trash before we leave. He lunged, not at Rias, but at Naruto, who was standing slightly behind her. Fried was fast, his movements erratic and unpredictable, his light-infused sword slashing in a wild arc. Naruto met the attack without flinching. Crimson scales flashed into existence over his hand as he caught the blade, the holy energy hissing and steaming against his draconic skin. But failing to cut through, Naruto's other hand shot out, grabbing Fried by the throat and lifting him off the ground. Fried choked, his legs kicking uselessly. Trash, Naruto growled, his voice a low rumble, is what I'm about to take out. The two fallen angels moved to intervene, their wings flaring. But they were stopped by Rias, who unleashed a torrent of her power of destruction, forcing them to leap back. The lead fallen angel held up a hand, a cynical, weary smile on his face. Hold on, now, let's not be hasty. We're all just soldiers following orders, aren't we? He looked past Rias, his eyes settling on Naruto, who was still holding the struggling Fried by the neck. You fight like you mean it. You must believe in something. I believe in protecting my friends and keeping promises. Naruto said, his voice cold. The fallen angel laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. Friends, promises, little lies you tell yourselves to get through the day. There is no peace, devil. There never was. This truce, this status quo, you all cling to, it's just a pause between breaths in an endless war. It's a lie told by cowards who have forgotten the thrill of battle. His words were filled with a profound, nihilistic weariness. It wasn't the voice of a monster who loved to kill. It was the voice of a soldier who had seen too much, who believed that war was the only truth left in the world. My leader, the great Kokobile, he remembers the truth, the fallen continued, his voice dropping to a zealous whisper. He remembers the glory of the Great War. He understands that strength is the only law, and conflict is the only true meaning. He will reignite the fires, and in that glorious blaze, all the lies will be burned away. You should be thanking us. We're here to set you free. The words struck Naruto like a physical blow. He had fought and watched his friends die in a war to end all wars, to achieve a lasting peace. This man, this fallen angel, was glorifying the very thing Naruto had sacrificed everything to stop. He was calling Naruto's dream a lie. A raw, uncontrollable rage, hotter than any dragon's fire, surged through him. He threw Fried aside, the crazed priest skidding across the concrete. Naruto took a step forward, his eyes blazing with golden light, the whispers in his head screaming for blood. You're wrong, Naruto snarled, his voice a low, dangerous growl that made the fallen angel's cynical smile falter. Peace is worth fighting for. And I will crush anyone who tries to take it away. Seeing the raw, murderous intent radiating from Naruto, the lead fallen decided their mission was complete. Our work here is done anyway. We've sent our message. He grabbed his partner and the dazed Fried. Enjoy the quiet while it lasts, Grimoire. In a flurry of black feathers, they shot into the sky and vanished. The abandoned warehouse fell silent, leaving only Naruto, Rias, and the terrified nun, who had been forgotten in the chaos. Rias walked over to Naruto, placing a gentle hand on his scaled arm. They got away, he said, his voice tight with frustration. They weren't the real prize, Rias replied, her expression grim. They were just the messengers. Kokobile, he is one of the leaders of the fallen angels. A cadre. If he is involved, this is far more serious than a simple territory dispute. The next day, the situation escalated dramatically. Kiba, driven by a personal vendetta against the Excaliburs that had been used in the experiments that killed his friends, had gone off on his own. The Grimoire peerage, now including a reluctant alliance with two exorcists from the church, Zenobia Quarta and Irina Shido, tracked him down, leading to a tense confrontation with Kokobile's lieutenants, Fried Selzen and the infamous Valpyr Galilei. The very man who had presided over the Holy Sword Project. The fight was a chaotic mess of conflicting allegiances and desperate attacks. But it was just a diversion. As Naruto and the others battled in a forest clearing, a horrifying realization dawned on Rias. This is a feint. she exclaimed, her eyes widening in horror as she felt a massive surge of power from the direction of the school. His real target, its Kuo Academy. By the time they arrived, it was too late. A massive, shimmering purple barrier had descended over the entire campus, cutting it off from the outside world. And in the center of the schoolyard, a monstrous, three-headed dog the size of a building was materializing from a dark magic circle. Cerberus, the guardian of the underworld, standing atop the school building, silhouetted against the artificial twilight of the barrier, was a figure with 10 black, feathered wings. Kokobile. He laughed, a deep, booming sound that echoed across the trapped campus. "Welcome, little devils and servants of a dead god," he roared, his voice filled with manic glee. "Tonight, Kuo Academy will become the stage for the opening act of a brand new war." The students and faculty who had been on campus were frozen in time by a secondary spell, turned into gray, statue-like figures. The only ones left to fight were the Grimoire Peerage, the 2 exorcists, and, to Naruto's surprise, the entire student council, led by the glasses-wearing Sona Citri, who he now realized was another high-class devil. "The barrier is absolute," Sona said, her expression calm and analytical despite the situation. "No communication can get in or out. We are on our own. Then we fight," Rias declared, her own power flaring to life. "Sona, your peerage will help mine handle Cerberus. We need to buy some time." "And do what?" Sona asked. Rias looked towards the school roof, where Kokobile was observing the scene with amusement. Beside him, Valpierre Galilei was setting up some kind of altar. The stolen Excalibur fragments laid out upon it. He was preparing a ritual. "We need to stop that ritual," Rias said. "Naruto." But Naruto was already moving. While the devils and exorcists prepared to face the monstrous Cerberus, Naruto's senses were screaming at him that the greater threat, the heart of the problem, was on that roof. He had to stop Valpierre from merging the swords. He shot forward, a blur of motion. He used the chaos of Cerberus's attack as cover, running up the side of the school building, his draconic power anchoring his feet to the wall. He reached the roof in seconds, landing in a silent crouch behind a ventilation unit. Valpierre Galilei was an old, stooped man, his face a web of wrinkles and fanatical obsession. Fried Selzen stood guard, his grin wider and more psychotic than ever. "Hurry it up, old man." Fried cackled. "I've got devils to slice, fallen angels to annoy, and holy maidens to defile. Busy schedule. Patience, you degenerate," Valpierre rasped, his hands glowing as he arranged the swords. "Once these fragments are merged into a single, true Excalibur, Lord Kokobile will have the power to challenge even the Devil Kings. This will be my greatest achievement." "I don't think so," Naruto said, stepping out from behind the unit. Fried spun around, his eyes lighting up. "You, the scaly freak, came back for another taste, Valpierre looked up, his eyes widening as he saw Naruto. He squinted, his gaze analytical. "Wait, that energy signature. It's not from the Red Dragon Emperor or the White Dragon vanishing. It is chaotic, primal, unregistered." His eyes, old and tired, suddenly burned with a cold, academic fire. "What are you? You don't belong in this world's equation. You are an abomination." The word struck Naruto with the force of a physical blow. Abomination, monster, demon fox. The taunts of his childhood, the hatred of the villagers, echoed in his mind. For a heart-stopping second, he was that lonely little boy again. The one who sat on the swing, watching the other children play, an outcast in his own home. The whispers in his head took advantage of his hesitation, roaring to the surface. "He is right, little host. We are not of this world. We are greater. Show him our greatness. Show him the power of a true monster. Burn him. Burn it all." Fried chose that moment to attack, his Excalibur fragment, mimic, transforming into a massive broadsword as he charged. Naruto's head snapped up, the gold in his eyes blazing. The voices, Valpierre's taunt, Fried's attack, it all coalesced into a single point of incandescent rage. But as the anger threatened to consume him, another image flashed through his mind. Rias, smiling at him over a slice of cake. Kiba, giving him a nod of respect. Kaneko, sharing her chocolate. The feeling of belonging, of family. They hadn't called him a monster. They had called him an ally. A friend. No, Naruto thought, a wave of clarity washing over him, silencing the whispers. He's wrong. He met Freed's charge. He didn't bother with scales. He ducked under the wild swing of the broadsword, his movements fluid and precise. He slammed the palm of his hand into Freed's chest, not with a blast of draconic energy, but with a perfectly controlled burst of force that sent the priest flying backward, crashing into the rooftop railing. He then turned his attention to Valpier. The old man, seeing Freed dispatched so easily, had backed away, his hands raised to cast a spell of holy light. Naruto was faster. He closed the distance in an instant, his hand chopping down not on Valpier, but on the altar. The stone cracked and shattered. The Excalibur fragments clattered across the rooftop, the ritual circle broken. Valpier stared in horror, his life's work undone in a single second. No, my research, my masterpiece. Your masterpiece was built on the graves of children, Naruto said, his voice dangerously quiet. Kiba had told him everything. It's over. Before he could secure the fragments, a shadow fell over him. Kokobile had descended from the sky, his 10 black wings beating slowly, his face a mask of cold fury. You have been a thorn in my side for too long, Anomaly. The Kadri class fallen angel said, his voice a low, threatening rumble. The sheer pressure of his aura was immense, making the very air feel thick and heavy. Naruto stood his ground, placing himself between Kokobile and the broken ritual. Down below, he could hear the sounds of the battle raging, the roars of Cerberus and the shouts of his friends. They were fighting for him. He would fight for them. You wanted a war, didn't you? Naruto said, his own draconic power rising to meet Kokobile's, a golden aura flaring to life around him. Well, you're not getting one. Not here. Not ever. I won't let you. Kokobile stared at the boy before him, at the defiant stance, the unwavering eyes, and the colossal, untamed power that burned within him. He saw not a devil, not an angel, but something else. A warrior, a worthy opponent. A slow, bloodthirsty smile spread across his face. Perhaps this trip wasn't a complete waste after all, he mused. The barrier around the school flickered. Then, with the sound of shattering glass that echoed across the sky, it disintegrated. In the distance, dozens of magic circles, Grimoire and Citri crests, were appearing, reinforcements finally breaking through. Kokobile sighed, a sound of genuine disappointment. It seems our playtime is over for now. He glanced at Naruto one last time. But we will meet again, dragon of, wherever you are from. And next time, I will not be holding back. Quote, with a final, powerful beat of his wings, he shot into the sky and vanished, taking the unconscious Valpier and the groaning Freed with him. The crisis was over. The sounds of battle died down, replaced by the shouts of the arriving devil reinforcements. Naruto stood on the rooftop, the wind whipping at his clothes, his heart still pounding. He had faced one of the most powerful beings in this world and hadn't flinched. He had protected his new home. But as he looked out over the damaged school and the exhausted faces of his friends below, he knew this was only the beginning. Kokobile's words were not a threat, they were a promise. The whispers of war had become a roar. Chapter 4 End. Chapter 5. Scales of Judgment, Feathers of Grace. The immediate aftermath of the battle was a controlled, professional chaos. Grimoire and Citri crests burned brightly across the wounded school grounds as dozens of high-level devils teleported in, their expressions grim. They moved with chilling efficiency, erecting containment barriers, tending to the magically frozen students, and assessing the catastrophic damage. The air, which moments before had thrummed with the violence of Kokobile's power, now crackled with the disciplined energy of two of the underworld's most elite houses. Rias and Sona stood side by side in the center of the ravaged courtyard, giving clipped, concise reports to their respective seconds in command. Naruto stood a few feet behind Rias, a silent, watchful presence. The draconic power had receded, leaving him with a bone-deep exhaustion and a dull, throbbing ache in his soul. He had tasted true, god-level power from Kokobile's aura, and it had left him feeling small and dangerously mortal. Suddenly, a palpable hush fell over the entire campus. The bustling devils froze, their heads snapping up as if pulled by a single string. A colossal, suffocating pressure descended upon them all, an aura so immense it felt like the sky itself was pressing down, threatening to crush them. It was a power that made Kokobeals feel like a raging bonfire next to a dying star. It was calm, controlled, and absolute. Naruto's every instinct screamed at him to drop into a defensive stance. The dragon in his blood stirred, not with aggression, but with a primal, instinctual caution, recognizing a predator at the absolute apex of the food chain. A magnificent, crimson magic circle, larger and infinitely more complex than any he had seen before, materialized in the space between the Grimoire and Cetri forces. From its glowing depths, two figures emerged. The first was Graphia Lucifuge, the silver-haired maid who had mediated the raiding game. Her expression was as placid and unreadable as ever. The second figure was a tall man with long, crimson hair that was an even deeper, more vibrant shade than Rias's. He wore elegant, noble robes and had a kind, gentle smile on his face, but his eyes held an ancient, immeasurable power that seemed to see and know everything. The moment he appeared, every devil present, including Rias and Sona, bowed their heads in a gesture of profound respect. "Brother," Rias whispered, her voice tight. This was Searzek's Lucifer, one of the four great Satans. Rias's older brother and, as Naruto could feel with terrifying certainty, arguably the most powerful being he had ever encountered. Searzek's gentle eyes swept over the scene, taking in the damage, the exhausted peerages, and the lingering traces of celestial and fallen energy. His smile didn't waver, but a flicker of something cold and dangerous passed through his gaze. He looked at his sister, his expression softening. "Are you all right, Rias?" he asked, his voice warm and melodic, yet carrying an undercurrent of undeniable authority. "I am, Searzek's," Rias replied, straightening up. "But the situation is—" "I know," he said, cutting her off gently. He then turned his gaze, and for the first time, Naruto felt the full, undivided attention of a devil king upon him. It was not hostile. It was not curious. It was analytical, a scientist observing a new, unknown element. For a terrifying second, Naruto felt completely transparent, as if Searzek could see every secret in his soul, every drop of draconic blood in his veins. "And it seems you have a new and interesting ally." Before anyone could respond to the loaded statement, the air crackled again. This time with a rougher, more chaotic energy. A second teleportation circle, this one a messy, haphazard design of black and purple, appeared nearby. From it strolled a man with black hair and a prominent goatee. Wearing a casual trench coat over an open shirt, he had a lazy, almost bored expression on his face, but Naruto could feel a power roiling beneath the surface, ancient and sharp as obsidian. 12 black, feathered wings unfurled from his back before retracting just as quickly. "Yo," the man said, offering a casual wave. "Heard there was a party. Sorry I'm late. One of my rogue generals tried to start a war, you see. Paperwork's a nightmare." It was Azazel, the governor-general of the fallen angels. The tension in the courtyard ratcheted up to an almost unbearable level. The devils bristled, their hands inching towards their own sources of power. To have the leader of the fallen angels appear unannounced in the heart of their cleanup operation was an unprecedented insult. Searzek, however, remained perfectly calm. "Azazel, your timing is, as always, impeccable. And reckless. Kokobeel is my problem," Azazel said with a shrug, his lazy eyes scanning the crowd before landing. "Like Searzek, on Naruto. And I'll deal with him. But first, I wanted to see the kid who apparently made my old war buddy tuck his tail and run." As if on cue, a third presence made itself known. It was not a teleportation circle, but a column of brilliant, golden light that descended from the heavens. It was warm, pure, and overwhelmingly powerful, a stark contrast to the demonic and fallen energies. When the light faded, it left behind the Archangel Michael, his multitude of golden wings creating a breathtaking halo behind him. At his side stood a humbled Xenovia and a star-struck Irina. "Forgive my intrusion, Searzek," Azazel, Michael said, his voice like the chime of 1,000 bells. But when an archangel and a Cadre-class fallen angel make their presence known in the human world, heaven is compelled to take notice. The leaders of the three factions, all here, on the grounds of Kuo Academy. The air was so thick with tension and raw power that Naruto felt it was a miracle the very atoms of the world weren't tearing themselves apart. This wasn't a cleanup anymore. It was a summit, and he was standing right in the middle of it. The occult R.E. Search Club lounge had been magically restored to its former pristine condition, yet the atmosphere within it was anything but comfortable. Sirzeks, Azazel, and Michael sat in magically conjured chairs around the low table, a silent, triangular standoff of immense power. Rias and Sona stood behind Sirzeks, their peerages respectfully waiting outside the room. All except for one. Naruto stood by Rias's side, his arms crossed, his expression a mask of neutrality. His presence in this room of kings and gods was a glaring anomaly, a question that hung unanswered in the air. Kokabeel has been a problematic element for centuries. Azazel began, breaking the silence as he casually studied a decorative vase. He is a relic, a warmonger who cannot accept that the age of open conflict is over. I offer my sincerest apologies for the trouble he has caused. He will be apprehended and punished with the full severity of Grigori law. I will likely lock him in the deepest level of cocytus for the next few millennia. That should bore the fight out of him. Your apology is accepted, Azazel, Michael said, his voice gracious and calm. And we in heaven are grateful to you, Rias Grimori, and to Yo. Peerage for protecting my exorcists and the town's inhabitants. You have done the world a great service this day. Rias bowed her head slightly. We were merely protecting our home, Lord Michael. Sirzeks, who had been silent, finally spoke, his gentle smile back in place. Indeed. Which brings us to the most interesting element of this incident. He turned his gaze from Michael and Azazel and settled it once more on Naruto. The other two leaders followed his lead, and Naruto found himself the focal point of the three most powerful beings in the world. This young man, Sirzeks continued, his tone pleasant but with an underlying edge of steel, fought a Cadre-class fallen angel to a standstill. He neutralized a threat that could have plunged us all back into war. And yet, we know nothing about him. He is not a devil, angel, or fallen. He wields no sacred gear that we can detect. His power is foreign. He leaned forward slightly. So, young man, it is time for you to answer a few questions. Who are you? Where does your power come from? And what are your intentions in my sister's territory? The questions were a direct challenge, an interrogation disguised as a polite inquiry. Rias tensed beside Naruto, ready to defend him, but he placed a subtle, restraining hand on her arm. This was his fight. He met Sirzek's gaze without flinching. He didn't try to posture or project power. He just spoke the truth. His voice clear and steady in the silent room. My name is Naruto Uzumaki. He paused, letting the name settle. It meant nothing to them, and that was the point. I'm not from this world, he continued, ignoring the flicker of surprise in their eyes. There was a war, and a magical accident. I ended up here. As for my power, it's a part of me. My bloodline. I'm still figuring it out myself. He then addressed the final, most important question. My intentions. He looked from Sirzeks to Rias, his expression softening for a fraction of a second. I was alone here. I had nothing. Rias and her peerage took me in. They gave me a place to stay. A home. My only intention was to protect that home, and the people in it who have become my friends. His answer was so simple, so devoid of ambition or deception, that it caught the three leaders off guard. They were used to dealing with beings who craved power, who spoke in riddles and half-truths. Naruto's blunt sincerity was a foreign concept. Azazel was the first to react, a slow, genuine grin spreading across his face. Well, I'll be damned, he chuckled. An interdimensional refugee with the power of a primo RDIAL dragon who just wants to protect his friends. I like you, kid. You're a refreshing change of pace. Michael's expression was one of gentle approval. He could sense no lie, no darkness in Naruto's heart. Only a fierce, unwavering loyalty. A pure and noble goal, Naruto Uzumaki. One that heaven can respect. Sirzeks remained impassive, his mind still working, calculating the variables. Naruto's honesty was disarming, but the unknown nature of his power was still a massive risk. Before he could press the issue further, the world dissolved into a flash of white gold light. Something shot rough the reinforced window of the clubroom, faster than a bullet, faster than sight. It was a projectile of pure, concentrated energy, holy in nature but infused with a cold, sterilizing power that as utterly alien to the grace of Michael's angels. It left a trail of golden motes in the air as it streaked across the room, its target absolute, Azazel. The Governor-General's eyes widened, his lazy demeanor vanishing, replaced by the sharp focus of a warrior caught by surprise. He began to raise a hand, to erect a barrier, but he was too slow. Sirzek and Michael reacted as well, their own powers flaring. But the projectile was too fast, its trajectory too perfect. It would not, however, reach its target. Naruto didn't have time to process the threat. He didn't think. He simply moved. His draconic blood, his shinobi instincts. His very soul screamed at the presence of a predator, an existential threat to his new pack. He threw himself in front of Azazel, turning his back to the attack. In the split second before impact, an agonizing, tearing sensation erupted from his back. Driven by pure, desperate instinct, a new aspect of his power manifested. A single, massive wing, not of feather but of thick, crimson scales and leathery membrane, burst from his right shoulder blade. It was a dragon's wing, ancient and powerful, and it unfurled just in time to intercept the projectile. The impact was immense. A deafening crack echoed through the room as the bolt of light slammed into the scaled wing. The holy, purifying energy warred against Naruto's draconic life force, sizzling and burning. He gritted his teeth, a pained roar tearing from his throat as the projectile drilled into his wing, shattering scales and searing flesh. But the wing held. He was thrown forward, crashing into a stunned Azazel, both of them tumbling to the floor. The attack was over as quickly as it had begun. Through the shattered window, Naruto saw a fleeting glimpse of a figure cloaked in white gold GHT on a distant rooftop before it vanished without a trace. Silence. Heavy, shocked silence. Naruto pushed himself up, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The wing, smoking and bleeding from a grievous, fist-sized hole in its center, slowly folded and receded back into his body, the process just as painful as its emergence. He clutched his shoulder, his back on fire. Azazel stared at him, his usual smirk gone. His eyes wide with a mixture of shock and something that looked suspiciously like gratitude. "Kid, you just... what in the name of my father was that?" Michael whispered, his serene face marred by a deep, troubled frown. "That light, it was holy. But it was not from heaven." Sirzek was on his feet, his gentle smile replaced by a mask of cold, regal fury. He walked to the window, high. Eyes scanning the horizon where the attacker had vanished. An assassination attempt on a faction leader during a peace summit. This was not a rogue agent. This was a declaration of war. The dynamic in the room had irrevocably shifted. The tension between the three factions evaporated, replaced by the chilling realization of a shared threat. This new player, this wielder of a strange, fanatical holy light, was hostile to all of them. They had tried to eliminate Azazel, a move clearly designed to sow chaos and reignite the old conflicts. Azazel got to his feet, brushing himself off. He looked at the hole in the wall, then back at Naruto, who was being tended to by a frantic Rias. "Well," the fallen angel leader said, his voice now devoid of its earlier laziness. "It seems we have a common enemy. An enemy who wants us at each other's throats. I, for one, have no intention of giving them what they want." He looked at Sirzek, then at Michael. "I propose a formal alliance. Here and now, the factions of the biblical myths, united against this new threat. No more posturing. No more old grudges. We stand together, or we fall separately." Michael nodded, his expression grim. "The assassination of a leader is an unforgivable sin. Heaven will stand with you." Sirzek turned from the window, his crimson aura flaring with contained, terrifying power. "The devils agree. The Kuo Town Alliance is hereby formed. Our first act will be to hunt down these assassins and uncover the truth behind their organization." His eyes fell on Naruto, and a new level of respect entered his gaze. Quote, "A task made possible by the sacrifice of our newest, and most unexpected, ally." After the other leaders had departed, leaving behind a swirl of promises and newfound purpose, Sirzek asked to speak with Naruto alone. Rias hesitated, casting a worried glance at Naruto's shoulder, but he gave her a reassuring nod. She reluctantly left the room, closing the doors behind her. The Devil King's powerful, gentle aura was now focused entirely on Naruto. "I misjudged you, Naruto Uzumaki," Sirzek said, his voice quiet. He had dropped the formal tone of a politician and now spoke with the gravity of a concerned older brother. I saw your power as a potential threat to my sister, a variable I could not control. I'm not a threat to her, Naruto said simply. I see that now, Sirzex conceded. You protected her home, and today, you saved the life of a faction leader and, in doing so, may have prevented the very war Kokobile sought to start. You have proven your character. He paused, his gaze intensifying. But do not mistake my gratitude for unconditional acceptance. This world is far more dangerous than you know. Rias is precious to me. More precious than my own life, or my title as a Satan. He took a step closer, and for the first time, Naruto felt the true, crushing weight of Sirzex Lucifer's power directed at him. It was a calm, clear, and absolute threat. If you ever bring her harm, Sirzex said, his voice a soft, lethal whisper, if your presence ever leads to her downfall, know this, there is no corner of this world, or any other, where you will be safe from me. Naruto didn't flinch. He didn't back down. He met the Devil King's gaze with his own unwavering stare. I would die before I let anyone, including myself, bring her harm. The promise was absolute, spoken with the same conviction with which he had once declared he would become Hokage. Sirzex studied him for a long, silent moment, searching for any hint of deception. He found none. The immense pressure receded. The Devil King smiled, a small, genuine smile this time. I believe you would, he said. A grudging, but profound, respect had been formed between them. Later that evening, Naruto stood on the balcony. The cool night air a balm on his still aching back. The wound had closed over, his draconic healing factor working overtime, but he could still feel the phantom pain. The memory of purifying light searing his very being. Does it hurt? Rias's voice came from behind him. He turned to see her standing in the doorway, her expression a mixture of worry and a dozen other emotions he couldn't quite decipher. It'll heal, he said, shrugging, though the movement sent a twinge of pain through his shoulder. She walked towards him, a small jar of what looked like a glowing green salve in her hand. Here, she said softly, let me. He hesitated, then nodded, turning his back to her. He pulled off the tattered remains of his shirt. Rias's breath hitched as she saw the wound. Though mostly healed, the skin over his right shoulder blade was a raw, angry red, a puckered scar in the shape of a perfect circle. Her touch was incredibly gentle as she applied the salve. It was cool and soothing, immediately leaching the fire from the wound. They stood in silence for a long time, the only sound the chirping of crickets in the night. I was so scared, she whispered finally, her voice thick. When that light appeared, when you jumped in front of him, for a second, I thought you were going to die. Comes with the territory, he mumbled, trying to make a joke of it, but the words fell flat. Don't, she said, her voice sharp. She finished applying the salve and came around to face him, her hands still resting on his shoulders. She looked up at him, her blue-green eyes shining with unshed tears. Don't treat it like it's nothing. Your safety, it's not nothing. Not to me. He looked down at her, at the genuine fear and concern etched on her face. In that moment, she wasn't a Grimoire heiress or a Devil King's sister. She was just Rias, and she was terrified of losing him. The realization hit him with the force of a physical blow. His own hands came up to rest on her arms. I'm not going anywhere, he said, his voice softer than he intended. I made a promise, remember. I'm going to protect you. And your dream of a peaceful life. And who will protect you? She asked, a tear finally escaping and tracing a path down her cheek. He smiled, a small, gentle smile. We'll protect each other. The space between them seemed to shrink, the air growing warm and thick with unspoken words. The political intrigue, the threat of war, the looming shadow of their new enemy, it all faded away, leaving just the two of them on a moonlit balcony. He was a refugee from a dead world. A boy with a dragon in his soul. She was a devil princess, a girl trapped in a cage of politics and duty. They were from different worlds, different species, different realities. And yet, in that moment, they were the only two people who truly understood each other. She leaned in, her forehead coming to rest against his chest. He could feel the soft warmth of her breath through his skin. Could smell the faint scent of roses in her hair. His arms instinctively wrapped around her, holding her close. It wasn't a hug born of passion, but of profound, unspoken comfort. A promise of sanctuary. "Stay with me, Naruto," she whispered against his chest, her voice muffled. He tightened his embrace, his chin resting on the top of her head. Always. Chapter 5 End. Chapter 6. The Tournament of Scales. A week after the celestial leaders had vanished from Kuo Town, leaving behind a fragile, unprecedented alliance, a semblance of normalcy returned to the Occult Research Club. The hole in the wall was gone. The furniture was pristine, and Akino was once again brewing tea that smelled of exotic spices and subtle magic. Yet, an invisible tension lingered. Conversations would halt or a moment when a bird flew past the window too quickly. Every flicker of light seemed like a potential threat. They were soldiers in a ceasefire, acutely aware that the war was not over, merely gathering its breath. It was into this quiet unease that Azazel dropped in, unannounced, appearing in a messy swirl of black and purple energy in the middle of the lounge. He wasn't dressed as a faction leader, but as he had been at the summit. In a rumpled trench coat and a casual shirt, looking more like a down-on-his-luck private investigator than the Governor-General of the Fallen Angels. "Yo," he said with a lazy grin, holding up a long, wrapped package. "Don't mind me, just dropping off a thank-you gift." The orc members, who had all instinctively leapt into combat stances, slowly relaxed. Rias, however, remained standing. Her arms crossed, an unimpressed look on her face. "Lord Azazel, it is customary to send a notice before visiting the territory of another noble." Yeah, formalities," Azazel waved a dismissive hand. "Too much paperwork. This is for you, kid." He tossed the package to Naruto. Naruto caught it reflexively. It was surprisingly light for its size. He unwrapped it to reveal a long, black coat. It was a simple, practical design, high-collared and falling to his knees. The material was strange, feeling like soft cotton but shimmering with a faint, almost invisible energy. "It's a custom piece from the Grigori's R&D, Azazel explained, plopping down onto the sofa as if he owned the place. "Woven with my own magic. It's highly resistant to most forms of energy, demonic, holy, you name it. Takes a licking and keeps on ticking. Plus, it repairs itself. Figured a guy who keeps getting his shirts burned off could use one." He winked. "A practical gift for a practical guy. Think of it as a thank you for, not letting me get vaporized." Naruto ran a hand over the material, a rare, small smile touching his lips. It was a thoughtful gift. He slipped it on. It was a perfect fit. Comfortable and allowing for a full range of motion. "Thanks," he said, the word genuine. "Don't mention it," Azazel said, his grin widening. "Now, for the real reason I'm here. I'm throwing a party." He leaned forward, his lazy eyes suddenly sharp and intense. "A tournament, to be specific. A festival of strength to celebrate our newfound, and hopefully not too short-lived, alliance. The Dragon of Dragons Festival. An invitation-only event for all beings in the three factions who wield a significant level of draconic power." "A tournament?" Rias asked, her brow furrowed with suspicion. "A friendly competition," Azazel clarified. "A chance for our best and brightest to test their mettle, show off a bit, and foster some goodwill. Plus," his gaze flickered to Naruto, "it's a perfect opportunity for us to gauge the full spectrum of draconic abilities currently in play. The more we know about dragon power, the better we might understand the energy signature of that little light beam that tried to turn me into cosmic dust." His true motive was laid bare, wrapped in the guise of celebration. It was a data-gathering exercise. He wanted to study Naruto, to compare his unique power to that of sacred gear wielders and other dragon kin, hoping to find a pattern, a weakness, anything that could give them an edge against their unseen enemy. It was a shrewd, political move. But it was also a necessary one. Rias looked at Naruto, a silent question in her eyes. It was his power, his secret. The choice was his. Naruto met her gaze and nodded. Azazel was right. They were blind, fighting in the dark against a foe they didn't understand. If letting them study his power could give them a weapon, it was a risk he had to take. "I'm in," Naruto said. Azazel clapped his hands together. "Excellent. The Grimoire Peerage is cordially invited as guests of honor. The festival starts in 3 days. Be there, or be square." The journey to the underworld was nothing like Naruto had expected. He had envisioned a jarring teleportation into a world of fire and brimstone. Instead, they were escorted to a hidden platform in the Kuo train station, where a magnificent, sweet, and belching locomotive of black and crimson metal awaited them. The Grimoire Express. The interior was more luxurious than any hotel he had ever seen. They had a private car with velvet-lined seats, polished wood paneling, and a large observation window. As the train picked up speed, it didn't race along the tracks but plunged into a swirling tunnel of purple energy, emerging a moment later into a new world. Naruto pressed his face against the glass, his eyes wide. The sky was a permanent, beautiful crimson, dotted with swirling nebulae of purple and gold instead of stars. There was no sun, but the landscape was illuminated by a soft, ambient light. They passed over jagged mountains that clawed at the sky and through forests of bizarre, glowing fungi and impossibly tall, skeletal trees. In the distance, he saw the gothic, spiraling towers of a devil city, its lights twinkling like fallen stars. "It's different," he murmured, unable to find the right words. "It's home," Rias said softly, standing beside him. She watched his face, not the scenery, a fond smile on her lips as she saw her world through his fresh, astonished eyes. The train was populated by other devils, nobles and their servants traveling to the capital. Naruto saw the way they looked at Rias, with a mixture of awe, respect, and adoration. He also saw the way they looked at him, a human in their midst, with curiosity and suspicion. He was an outsider here, more so than he had ever been in Konoha. But when Rias would slide her hand into his, a simple, grounding gesture, the stares and whispers seemed to fade away. The tournament was held in a colossal, open-air coliseum carved from the side of a mountain, in a territory ruled by a being known as Tannen, the Dragon King. The air itself thrummed with power, a symphony of 100 different draconic auras all resonating in one place. It made the whispers in Naruto's own blood hum, a low, background thrum of excitement. As they entered the main gallery, they were immediately met by Sona Citri and her peerage. Her knight, Saji Genshiro, a boy with a cocky grin, stepped forward. "Uzumaki," Saji said, nodding at Naruto. "Heard you were coming. Ready to see what a real sacred gear-wielding dragon can do." A small, shadowy lizard-like creature was wrapped around his arm, one of the manifestations of the absorption line, a sacred gear containing the soul of the prison dragon, Vritra. Naruto just grinned, ready to get your ass kicked. A friendly, competitive energy sparked between them, a promise of a future rivalry. But a moment later, a far greater presence made itself known. Naruto felt two colossal auras flare to life nearby, so powerful they dwarfed everything else in the Colosseum. One was a burning, fiery red, radiating from Issei's boosted gear. The other was a cool, brilliant white, emanating from a silver-haired young man standing across the gallery. A deep, ancient voice suddenly echoed directly in Naruto's mind, a voice that was not one of the whispers, but something far older and more coherent. "So, you are the anomaly Azazel spoke of." Naruto froze, looking at Issei, who seemed oblivious. The voice was coming from the Red Gauntlet. It was Didraig, the Welsh dragon, one of the two legendary heavenly dragons. "You can talk to me." Naruto thought back, feeling awkward. "Your very soul resonates with the song of the dragon," Didraig replied, his mental voice a deep, rumbling baritone. "But it is a song I have not heard since the dawn of creation. It is not of this world. It is wilder. Be wary, young one. A power like yours will draw the attention of many ancient and hungry things." The warning was clear, and it sent a chill down Naruto's spine. Before he could ask more, the opening ceremony began. Azazel stood in the center of the arena. His voice magically amplified. He welcomed the competitors and laid out the rules. The Dragon of Dragons Festival would be a multi-stage event, designed to test not just power, but speed, strategy, and teamwork. The first stage was the Gauntlet, a brutal, magically constructed obstacle course that stretched for miles, filled with moving platforms, elemental traps, and summoned magical beasts. The goal was to reach the end in the fastest time. When the starting signal blared, the competitors shot forward in a blur of wings, magic, and raw speed. Naruto, lacking any form of flight, did what he knew best. He ran. He weaved through fire traps with an agility that left the other competitors stunned. He used his shinobi instincts to anticipate and evade the attacks of lumbering rock golems. He didn't overpower the course. He flowed through it, a river finding the path of least resistance. He finished third, behind only a fallen angel with 6 wings and a pure-blooded dragon, who had simply flown over most of the obstacles. His performance earned him a round of impressed murmurs from the crowd. The second stage was a team battle. The 64 remaining competitors were randomly sorted into teams of 3. Their objective: capture a flag from a central tower in a simulated forest environment and return it to their own base. As fate would have it, Naruto was teamed up with a disgruntled Saji and a stoic, silent warrior from a clan of lizardmen, whose scales were the color of obsidian and who carried a massive, crude axe. "Great," Saji muttered. "I'm stuck with the pretty boy Grimori pet and a guy who looks like he's going to eat me." "He won't eat you," Naruto said with a grin. "And I'm not her pet. Let's do this." Their teamwork was clumsy at first. Saji was reckless, trying to use his absorption lines to drain energy from their opponents directly. The lizard man, whose name was Chorus, was a silent berserker, charging into fights with no strategy. Naruto found himself in the unexpected role of team captain. "Stop," he barked, pulling them behind a massive, holographic tree as a rival team flew past. "You two are fighting like idiots. Chorus, you're the tank. Your job is to draw their fire. Saji, your support. You don't attack them, you use your lines on the environment. Absorb the energy from their spells, weaken the ground beneath them. I'll be the striker. I go for the flag." "Got it." They both looked at him, surprised by his sudden, commanding tone. They nodded. Their new strategy worked perfectly. In their next encounter, Chorus charged in, his obsidian scales shrugging off magical bolts. While the enemy team was focused on the seemingly unstoppable lizardman, Saji quietly attached his lines to the floating platform they were standing on, draining its energy and causing it to crumble. As they fell in confusion, Naruto zipped past them, a golden blur, and snatched the flag. They fought their way to the central tower, a chaotic melee of a dozen teams all vying for the main flag. It was here that Naruto encountered him. He was a young man with silver hair, clad in simple white robes. He moved with a serene grace, his expression calm and detached. He wasn't a devil, angel, or fallen. He felt human, but the energy he wielded was not. It was a form of holy power, but cold and rigid, like structured light. Their teams clashed. The silver-haired man's gaze fell on Naruto, and a flicker of recognition crossed his face. He ignored the others and moved to intercept Naruto directly. "The draconic anomaly," the man said, his voice calm and dispassionate. "My master will be pleased with this data." He attacked. He didn't use spells or weapons in the traditional sense. He molded the light into solid constructs, spears, shields, and razor-sharp discs that he launched with incredible speed. His fighting style was defensive, precise, and strangely familiar. Every time Naruto tried to close the distance, a perfectly angled shield of light would appear, deflecting his blow. Every time he tried to use a burst of draconic energy, the man would create a barrier that seemed to specifically dampen its effects. It was like fighting a surgeon who knew his anatomy perfectly. Naruto was forced to use more power than he was comfortable with. He manifested his scales, his speed and strength increasing. The whispers in his head began to sing, urging him to overwhelm this sterile, ordered opponent with pure, chaotic fire. He pushed them down, focusing on his opponent's movements. He saw an opening. The man had created a wall of light to block Chorus's axe swing. For a split second, his flank was exposed. Naruto feinted a frontal attack, then used an explosive burst of speed to appear at the man's side, his scaled fist cocked back. The man's eyes widened slightly in surprise, unable to react in time. Naruto's punch slammed into his side. But instead of a solid impact, the man's body dissolved into a shower of harmless light particles, only to reform a dozen feet away. His calm expression now marred by a slight frown. "Your combat prowess is greater than anticipated," the man said. "The data is sufficient." Before Naruto could press the attack, Saji managed to grab the main flag. The silver-haired man gave Naruto one last, analytical look before he and his team simply melted into the shadows and retreated, forfeiting the match. Naruto stood panting, a deep sense of unease settling in his gut. That man, he hadn't been fighting to win. He had been fighting to test, to analyze. He was one of them. One of Hadriel's agents. As the adrenaline of the fight faded, the strain of using his power caught up with him. A wave of dizziness washed over him, and the world seemed to tilt. The whispers in his head, agitated by the battle, flared into a roar. And with them came a vision, clearer and more vivid than any before. He was no longer in the arena. He was standing on a black, glassy plain under a sky of dying embers. Before him stood Hadriel, the celestial arbiter, his silver hair flowing, his face beautiful and sorrowful. And at his feet lay a magnificent, wounded golden dragon, its scales cracked, its breathing ragged. "You are a creature of chaos," Hadriel said, his voice not filled with hate, but with a profound, tragic certainty. "Your very existence invites imbalance. Your power, left unchecked, will inevitably lead to ruin. Just as it did for my people. I do not hate you, dragon. I pity you." He raised a hand, from which a spear of pure, white gold light materialized. "But the order of the universe is absolute. And you are an aberration. Therefore, you must be purged. It is not malice. It is judgment." The spear descended. The dragon roared its defiance. Naruto's eyes snapped open. He was back in the arena, Rias and Saji shaking him. Their faces etched with concern. "Naruto, are you okay?" Rias asked, her hand on his forehead. "You just spaced out." "I'm fine," he lied, his heart pounding. The vision, it had been a memory. The dragon's memory, and for the first time, he understood. Hadriel wasn't a monster. He wasn't a power-hungry villain. He was a judge, a zealot on a holy crusade, conceived that he was saving the universe from itself. And that made him infinitely more terrifying. Naruto, now burdened by this chilling new insight, fought his way through the final stage of the tournament, the one-on-one duels. He defeated Saji in a hard-fought battle of attrition. He overcame Chorus's brute strength with superior tactics. His final opponent was a haughty, pure-blooded dragon noble named Valerius, who believed that raw power and lineage were the only things that mattered. Their duel was a spectacle. Valerius transformed into a massive, fire-breathing green dragon, a being of immense destructive force. Naruto, in contrast, remained in his human form. He didn't try to match Valerius's power. He used his small size and speed to his advantage, weaving between blasts of fire, using his scaled limbs to deflect claws and tail swipes. "Fight me, whelp," Valerius roared, his voice shaking the Colosseum. "Show me your true form. Or do you not have one, you half-blooded disgrace?" Naruto ignored the taunts. He was fighting with a cold, focused clarity. He was not just fighting Valerius, he was fighting the philosophy he represented. The philosophy of unchecked, prideful power. He very chaos that Hadriel sought to destroy. He saw his opening. After unleashing a massive cone of fire, Valerius was momentarily overextended. Naruto ran up the dragon's outstretched wing, a blur of black and gold. He reached the massive head and placed his palm between the dragon's eyes. He didn't use a destructive blast. He channeled a controlled, concussive burst of draconic energy, a technique he had been practicing in secret. It was a focused shockwave, designed not to injure, but to stun. The massive dragon froze, its eyes rolling back in its head, before it crashed to the arena floor, unconscious. The Colosseum was silent for a moment, then erupted in thunderous applause. A mere human-looking boy had defeated a full-blooded dragon without transforming. It was unheard of. Azazel announced him the winner. The dragon of dragons. The crowd cheered, but as Naruto stood in the center of the arena, the sole victor, he felt no joy. His mind was on the silver-haired man, on the vision of Hadriel, on the chillingly righteous words of judgment. Later that evening, a grand feast was held in the capital city of Lilith. Laughter and music filled the grand hall, but Naruto and Rias stood on a balcony, overlooking the crimson-lit spires of the city. "You won," Rias said softly, a proud smile on her face. "You were magnificent." "He thinks he's the hero," Naruto said, his voice distant. He recounted the vision to her. Hadriel's words, the sorrow in his eyes as he prepared to execute the golden dragon. "He's not trying to conquer the world. He's trying to save it." From us. From people like me. Rias listened, her smile fading, replaced by a deep, thoughtful frown. She understood the implication immediately. It was one thing to fight a monster who wanted to watch the world burn. It was another thing entirely to fight a savior who was willing to burn your world to save all the others. Then we will have to prove him wrong, she said, her voice firm with resolve. She took his hand, her fingers intertwining with his. We will show him that power does not have to lead to chaos. That dragons and devils can be forces for protection, not just destruction. Naruto looked at their joined hands, then into her determined, beautiful eyes. He had won a tournament. He had earned fame and respect. But here, on this balcony, he understood that the real battle had only just begun. And it would not be a trial of strength, but a war for the very soul of their world. Chapter 6 End. Chapter 7. A God's Gambit. Returning to Kuo town from the underworld was like waking from a strange, vibrant dream. Naruto was no longer just an anomaly, he was a name, a title whispered with a mixture of awe and apprehension in the supernatural circles. The Golden Dragon of Kuo. The victory at the festival had painted a target on his back. Arrogant young devils, eager to make a name for themselves, would issue foolish challenges in back alleys, which Naruto would end with a single, non-lethal, utterly humiliating flick to the forehead. Envoys from other noble houses would appear with discreet offers, promising wealth and status if he would abandon the House of Grimoire. Naruto's response was always the same, a flat, dismissive, not interested, before he would turn and walk away, leaving the sputtering envoys in his wake. His loyalty was not for sale. It had been earned with a cup of tea in a warm room when he had nothing. Cemented in a trial by fire, and affirmed on a moonlit balcony. He was where he belonged. This newfound fame was a minor annoyance, a distraction from the real Reet that lingered at the edge of his senses. The vision of Hadriel was burned into his mind, a constant, chilling reminder of the war that was coming. The celestial arbiter was not a creature of impulse. His silence was not inaction. It was preparation. Naruto could feel it in the stillness of the world, the calm before a storm of holy, righteous fury. The storm broke on a quiet Tuesday afternoon. The first incident was reported as a strange gas leak at a downtown apartment. A young man, a known practitioner of black magic with a trace of fallen angel blood from a distant ancestor, was found unconscious in his home. He wasn't dead, but every ounce of his supernatural power had been scoured from his body, leaving him utterly, irreversibly human. The second victim was a rogue exorcist who had been hiding in Kuo. Dabbling in demonic contracts, he was found in a park, his holy energy gone, his mind wiped clean. There were no witnesses, no signs of a struggle. It was as if a ghost had passed through, leaving behind only hollowed-out shells. Rias and her peerage investigated, but found nothing. The energy signatures were gone, perfectly erased. It was Sona Citri who discovered the pattern. The victims are all hybrids, she explained, her voice tense, during an emergency meeting at the Occult Research Club. Beings who represent a mixture of opposing factions. A half-fallen dabbling in devilry. An exorcist using demonic power. It's an ideological purge. They are targeting what they perceive as impurities. A cold dread settled over the room. Everyone's eyes, almost as one, turned to Akano. Akano Himahima, the priestess of thunder, Rias's queen and best friend. The daughter of a human mother and a powerful fallen angel father, Barakil. A being who wielded both holy lightning and demonic darkness. She was the living embodiment of the impurity their new enemy sought to cleanse. Akano, who was usually smiling, had her hands clasped tightly in her lap, her knuckles white. Era, she said, her voice a fraction too light. It seems I'm on their list. They won't touch you, Rias said, her voice a low, dangerous growl, her demonic power rising like a physical heat in the room. I won't let them. We'll protect you, Akano-san. Issei declared, his boosted gear materializing on his arm. Naruto remained silent, his eyes closed. He was expanding his senses, not his magical ones, but the primal, draconic senses that felt the world in a different way. He tasted the air, felt the vibrations in the earth, listened to the subtle shifts in the town's energy. He was hunting. He had felt the attacker's energy once before, that cold, structured light from the silver-haired man at the tournament. He was searching for that same signature. He found it faint, fleeting. But there, the shrine, he said, his eyes snapping open, the old Shinto shrine on the hill, Akino's home. They teleported instantly, appearing in the serene, wooded grounds of the Himahima shrine. The air was heavy, charged with a power that did not belong. Standing in the center of the courtyard, before the main prayer hall, were three figures clad in white, hooded robes. They radiated a calm, implacable power, the same cold, purifying light as Hadriel's scout. The seraphic executioners. The one in the center, clearly the leader, stepped forward. Akino Himahima, the executioner said, its voice a melodic, genderless harmony. We have come to offer you salvation. Your existence is a conflict of light and darkness. A war within a single soul. This is a torment you need not endure. We will purge the taint of the fallen and the demonic from you. We will cleanse you, leaving only the pure, human soul of your mother. We are here to set you free. The words were spoken not as a threat, but as a gentle, compassionate offer. It was this serenity, this absolute conviction in their own righteousness, that made them so terrifying. I don't need your salvation, Akino replied, stepping forward, her usual smile now a tight, furious baring of teeth. Golden lightning crackled around her fists. I am who I am. I have made peace with my heritage, with both sides of my blood. You have embraced the chaos, the executioner stated, a note of sorrow in its harmonious voice. Then you have chosen judgment. The three executioners attacked as one. They moved with a synchronized, fluid grace, their white robes blurring. Their weapons were constructs of pure, hard light, swords, spears, and whips that cut through the air with a silent, deadly grace. The battle was immediate and brutal. Rias unleashed her power of destruction. But one of the executioners created a complex, multi-layered shield of light that absorbed and dissipated the attack. Hiba engaged another in a duel of blades, his demonic sword clashing against a sword of pure light. He was faster, but his opponent's defensive style was perfect, each block and parry flawlessly executed. Kaniko's earth-shattering punches were chi with barriers that distributed the force, rendering them ineffective. Their enemy was a hard counter. Their light didn't just oppose demonic energy, it unraveled it. Every time one of Rias's attacks was blocked, she would flinch. The feedback feeling like a part of her own power was being erased. They were being systematically dismantled. Akino flew into the air, a storm of holy lightning gathering around her. Disappear, she screamed, unleashing a massive bolt of golden energy at the lead executioner. The executioner simply raised a hand. A vortex of white light spun into existence, catching the lightning, absorbing it, and then firing it back, amplified and purified. Akino cried out as her own attack, now twisted into a weapon against her, slammed into her, sending her crashing to the ground. Naruto moved, a blur of motion, catching her before she hit the dirt. He laid her down gently. She was unconscious, her breathing shallow. He stood up, his gaze falling on the three serene, white-robed figures. They had defeated Rias's entire peerage in a matter of minutes without taking a single scratch. And they had done it with a calm, detached efficiency, as if they were pruning a diseased branch from a tree. The rage that ignited in Naruto's chest was a cold one. It wasn't the hot fury he had felt against Riser, or the indignant anger he had felt towards Kokobile. This was the cold, quiet rage of a protector who had seen his family harmed. The whispers in his blood began to scream. They were a chorus of ancient, chaotic fury, a stark contrast to the ordered serenity of his opponents. Order must be met with chaos. Law must be met with freedom. Let us loose, little host. Let us show this sterile light the true, untamable fire of life itself. This time, Naruto did not fight them. He did not suppress them. He listened. He reached into the heart of their screaming rage and found the truth they were offering. His power wasn't just strength. It was a concept, the embodiment of wild, chaotic, untamable life. It was the antithesis of the rigid, sterile order that Hadriel and his executioners represented. To defeat order, he couldn't just use brute force. He had to embrace the chaos. I am not your host, he whispered to the voices in his soul. I am your partner. He closed his eyes and let go. He didn't just draw on the power, he merged with it. He accepted the wildness, the fury, the chaos, and filtered it through the ironclad control of his own will, his own Uzumaki life force. It was a perfect, harmonious balance of the wild dragon and the unyielding shinobi. The lead executioner, sensing the monumental shift in Naruto's energy, turned its full attention to him. The anomaly is reacting. Prepare for purification. Naruto opened his eyes. They were no longer just gold, but a swirling vortex of blue and gold, the pupil across slit, a fusion of human and dragon. A dense, golden aura, shot through with crimson sparks, exploded around him, so powerful it racked the stone courtyard beneath his feet. Crimson scales didn't just appear on his skin. They flowed like liquid metal, forming a sleek, form-fitting armor over his torso, arms, and legs. From his back, not one, but two magnificent draconic wings burst forth, their membranes the color of a stormy sky. His hair seemed to lengthen, becoming wilder, and 9 distinct, swirling tomo marks, reminiscent of the Sage of Six Paths, appeared on the back of his new coat. He had achieved a new form. A perfect synthesis. The Sage Dragon mode. He did not roar. He simply looked at the lead executioner, and the sheer, overwhelming pressure of his new form was enough to make the serene angel-like beings take a step back. Your turn, Naruto said, his voice a calm, resonant harmony of his own and 1,000 ancient draconic echoes. He vanished. He reappeared directly in front of the lead executioner, his fist cocked back. The executioner, for the first time, showed surprise, its movements a fraction too slow. It raised a shield of light, but Naruto's punch, now imbued with the conceptual weight of pure chaos, didn't just strike it, it shattered it. The shield of absolute order broke against the fist of absolute freedom. The executioner was thrown backward, its serene composure finally broken. The other two moved to intercept, their light whips and spears cutting through the air. Naruto didn't dodge, he weaved between them, his movements a fluid, unpredictable dance. He was a leaf on the wind, a force of nature that could not be predicted or contained. He disabled both of them with precise, devastating chops to their necks. Their light construct weapons dissolving as they crumpled to the ground. Only the leader remained. It stood, its white robes slightly torn, its aura flickering. Impossible, it whispered. Such chaotic energy. Yet, it is controlled. It is balanced. Balance is about more than just order, Naruto said, appearing before the executioner again. He raised his hand, a swirling sphere of golden and crimson energy forming in his palm. It was not a Rasengan, but something more. A Rasen chaos sphere. It's about accepting that some things are meant to be wild. He pressed the sphere into the executioner's chest. There was no explosion, only a silent, brilliant flash of light. The executioner's purifying energy was overwhelmed, its form unmade by the raw, chaotic life force of Naruto's attack. It dissolved into a shower of harmless, glittering motes. Victory. But it had come at a cost. The moment the last enemy faded, Naruto's new form dissolved. He staggered, falling to one knee, every muscle in his body screaming in protest. The transformation had pushed him to his absolute limit, draining his life force at an alarming rate. He looked over at his friends. Rias was helping a groggy Akino to her feet. Kiba and Kaneko were battered but standing. They had survived. They were safe. A shadow fell over him. A calm, immense pressure that dwarfed that of his previous opponents. Naruto looked up, his heart sinking. Hadriel, the celestial arbiter, had descended. He stood in the center of the courtyard, his presence not violent, but absolute, like a law of physics. He surveyed the scene, his defeated executioners dissolving into light, the battered devils, and Naruto, on one knee, panting and drained. He looked at Naruto's fading sage dragon aura with an expression of profound, tragic sorrow. I had hoped to prune the weed before it bloomed, Hadriel said, his voice beautiful and sad. But I see now the seed of chaos has taken root and flowered into a truly magnificent, terrible thing. He made no move to attack. He simply raised a hand, and the motes of light that were his defeated soldiers flew to him, reforming into unconscious, ethereal bodies that floated behind him. You have proven that your power is a greater corruption than I had ever imagined, Hadriel continued, his gaze locked on Naruto. A fusion of mortal will and primordial chaos. An ultimate imbalance. He shook his head slowly. The garden was merely diseased. Now, it is infested. The only option left is to cleanse it with fire. He turned, his back to them, his form ginning to glow with an impossibly bright light. Enjoy your victory, children of darkness and chaos. It will be your last. With that cryptic promise, he and his fallen soldiers dissolved into a column of white gold light and vanished, leaving behind only the scent of ozone and the chilling weight of his words. Back in the safety of the clubroom, the gravity of what had just happened settled in. They had won the battle. But the war had been declared, and the enemy was a being who could make a Cadre-class fallen angel look like a common thug. Akeno was quiet, shaken to her core by an enemy that had sought not to kill her, but to erase a part of who she was. The others were silent, nursing their wounds and their pride. Rias was by Naruto's side, gently tending to the scrapes and bruises that littered his body. The transformation had left no lasting physical wounds, but she could see the profound exhaustion in his eyes. He had almost drained his own life force to protect them. To protect Akeno. She finished cleaning a cut on his cheek, her fingers lingering on his skin. He looked at her, his usual bright blue eyes clouded with weariness, but holding a deep, reassuring warmth. The fear she had felt when she saw him facing Hadriel's executioners, the terror of almost losing him, coalesced with the immense pride and awe she felt for his sacrifice. It all became too much to hold back. Naruto, she whispered, her voice trembling. He just looked at her, waiting. The walls she had so carefully constructed around her heart, the composure of a Grimoire heiress, crumbled to dust. She leaned in, closing the small distance between them, and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was not fiery or passionate. It was soft, hesitant, and filled with a universe of unspoken emotions. It was a thank you. It was a plea. It was a confession. It was the taste of strawberry shortcake and black tea, of ozone and dragon's fire, of fear and relief and a deep, burgeoning love that could no longer be denied. When they broke apart, they simply looked at each other, their foreheads resting together. The world outside, with its gods and its wars, faded to nothing. In that quiet, intimate moment, everything was laid bare. I'm not losing you, she whispered, her voice fierce with a desperate, protective love. I won't. He brought a hand up to cup her cheek, his thumb gently wiping away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. He smiled, a tired but genuine smile that reached his eyes and chased away the shadows. You won't have to, he promised. I'm right here. He was her protector. She was his anchor. In a world threatened by a purifying, absolute fire, they had found their own flame in each other. And they would face the coming dawn, together. Chapter 7 End. Chapter 8. The Grimoire Gauntlet. The week following Hadriel's declaration of war was a strange, deceptive calm. The sun rose and set on Kuo town, students went to class, and the Occult Research Club lounge was once again filled with the scent of Akeno's tea. But beneath the surface, everything had changed. Naruto and Rias's relationship, no longer a thing of unspoken glances and quiet moments, had blossomed into a comfortable, grounding intimacy. A shared touch, a soft smile across the room, a quiet conversation on the balcony late at night, these small gestures became the anchor in the silent, waiting storm. They were a unit, a partnership. Their unspoken commitment to each other a quiet defiance against the coming celestial fire. This fragile peace was shattered not by a flash of holy light, but by the silent, inexorable weight of tradition. A formal Grimoire magic circle, stark and commanding, appeared in the clubroom, and from it stepped Graphia Lucifuge. Her expression was, as always, unreadable, but the scroll she held in her hand, sealed with the wax crest of the head of the Grimoire clan, radiated an aura of absolute authority. By order of my lord, Zeodicus Grimoire, Graphia announced, her voice leaving no room for argument. Rias Grimoire and her associate, Naruto Uzumaki, are hereby summoned to the Grimoire capital city of Citri. You are to depart within the hour. The word, associate, was spoken with a deliberate, cold precision. This wasn't an invitation, it was a summons. The news of the events in Kuo town, the defeat of Riser Phoenix, the standoff with Kokobile, and now the emergence of a new god-level threat drawn to a human of unknown origin, had finally reached the highest echelons of the underworld's oldest families. The elders wanted an accounting. Rias read the summons, her jaw tightening. My father is not a man to be trifled with, she said to Naruto, her voice low and tense. And the clan elders, they are old, powerful, and deeply rooted in tradition. They will not see you as a hero. They will see you as a problem. Let them, Naruto replied, his voice calm as he met her worried gaze. He placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. I'm not afraid of a few stuffy old devils. His confidence was a comfort. But as they stepped through the teleportation gate into the Grimoire capital, Naruto understood Rias's apprehension. Citri was nothing like the modern, almost human Lee K cities he had glimpsed from the train. This was a city carved from an ancient, obsidian-like rock, with towering spires that seemed to scrape the crimson sky. The architecture was Gothic and severe, radiating an aura of immense age and power. The air itself felt heavy, thick with the weight of millennia of demonic power, tradition, and political intrigue. There were no friendly smiles here, no casual greetings. The devils who walked these polished stone streets, all clad in the formal attire of various noble houses, moved with a predatory grace. They looked at Rias with a mixture of reverence and fear, bowing their heads as she passed. And they looked at Naruto, a human in simple black clothes walking at her side, with undisguised contempt. He was a stain on their perfect, pure-blooded tapestry. They were escorted to the Grimoire estate, a fortress-like castle that was a city in itself. They were not led to a comfortable lounge, but to a vast, cavernous hall that felt more like a courtroom than a reception area. High, vaulted ceilings were lost in shadow, and the walls were lined with the stern, watching portraits of generations of Grimoire ancestors. At the far end of the hall, on a raised dais, sat a council of a dozen devils. They were ancient, their faces etched with the lines of centuries of political maneuvering, their eyes holding the cold, reptilian stillness of beings who measured time in ages. Presiding over them, from a throne-like chair of carved obsidian, was a man who could only be Lord Zeodicus Grimoire. He had Rias's crimson hair, though his was streaked with gray, and a powerful, regal bearing. His face was a stern, unreadable mask. Sirzek stood to his father's right, but his expression was neutral, his hands clasped behind his back. He was here as a Saidan, a spectator, not as a son. This was a matter for the House of Grimoire. Rias bowed deeply. Father, honored elders, I have answered your summons. Zeodicus Grimoire did not return the greeting. His cold, assessing gaze swept past his daughter and fixed on Naruto. This is the one, he stated, his voice a deep, resonant bass that echoed in the silent hall. The human, the catalyst, an elderly devil with a sharp, pointed beard and the arrogant crest of the House of Baal on his robes, sneered. He is an unacceptable liability, Lord Grimoire, he said, his voice thin and reedy. Since his arrival, this outsider has brought nothing but conflict. He antagonized the noble house of Phoenix. He drew the attention of the warmonger Kokobile. And now, his chaotic presence has attracted a new enemy. A being of immense power who threatens us all. He is a magnet for disaster. He protected me, Rias retorted, her voice ringing with defiance. He saved my honor and my future. He has fought for this family. He has fought to embed himself in this family. Another elder snapped, a stray dog who has found a warm hearth. His power is unstable, his origins unknown. He is a contamination of our world. A risk we can no longer afford. The accusations came thick and fast, a barrage of political venom and pure-blooded prejudice. They saw him as a disease, a foreign element that threatened the stability of their ancient, ordered world. Finally, the elder from the House of Baal rose, pointing a trembling, accusatory finger at Naruto. For the security of the House of Grimoire, and for the stability of the underworld itself, I demand that this creature be exiled. Rias Grimoire, you will sever all ties with this human pet. It is a matter of duty. You will choose your family over your dalliance. Rias opened her mouth to unleash a furious rebuttal, but Naruto stepped forward, moving to stand slightly in front of her. He had been silent, listening, his expression unreadable. Now, he raised his head, and his calm, blue eyes swept across the council of ancient, powerful devils. He was not intimidated. He was not angry. He looked bored. First off, he said, his voice casual but carrying an unmistakable weight that cut through the tension, I'm not her pet. I'm her partner. He then looked directly at Lord Baal, a hard, dangerous glint in his eye. Second, I'm not going anywhere. Rias is my family now. And I don't abandon my family. He let the words hang in the stunned silence. He then gave the council a slow, feral grin that was all dragon. If you want me gone, you're welcome to try and remove me. But I should warn you, he cracked his knuckles, the sound echoing like gunshots in the vast hall, I don't go down easy. The sheer, unadulterated audacity of his defiance left the entire council speechless. A mere human, standing in the heart of their power, was threatening them. Lord Bale's face turned a shade of purple, his rage palpable. Lord Grimory's stern expression didn't change, but for the first time. A flicker of something, interest, surprise, showed in his eyes. That night, Naruto was given opulent quarters in a secluded wing of the castle. It was a gilded cage, beautiful and isolating. He knew the confrontation in the hall was only the first move in a deadly game. These old devils didn't play fair. They played to win. He sat cross-legged on the floor in the center of the room, meditating. He wasn't trying to connect with the dragon. He was doing the opposite. He was sinking his senses into the world around him, becoming a part of the silence of the castle. He listened to the sigh of the wind through the high castle windows, the distant footsteps of the guards in the hall, the faint, magical hum of the wards woven into the stone walls. It was a shinobi's technique, a way to become one with the environment, to feel its slightest disturbance. He waited. Around midnight, he felt it. A flicker, a subtle, momentary dip in the energy of the ward outside his door. It was so faint, a devil would have missed it. But to Naruto's senses, it was a ripple in a perfectly still pond. They were here. He didn't move. He kept his breathing even, his eyes closed. The massive wooden door to his room creaked open without a sound. 3 figures, clad in the black, featureless armor of the Grimory elite guard, slipped into the room. They moved like ghosts, their demonic energy perfectly suppressed. They held swords forged from a special alloy designed to disrupt both draconic and demonic power. They surrounded him, their blades raised for a synchronized, killing blow. They struck. Their swords plunged down into the spot where Naruto had been sitting. But all they met was empty air and the floor. A split second before their attack landed, Naruto had used a burst of pure, focused energy from his feet to launch himself straight up into the air, twisting his body to adhere to the high, shadowed ceiling like a spider. The 3 assassins looked at the empty space. Their momentary confusion, their last mistake. Naruto dropped. He landed on the shoulders of the one in the center, his legs scissoring around the guard's neck, twisting and throwing him into one of his comrades. As the 2 guards collided in a clatter of armor, Naruto spun, his legs sweeping out and kicking the 3rd guard behind the knees, sending him sprawling. It was over in less than 3 seconds. 2 of the guards were unconscious. The 3rd, the leader, scrambled back, bringing his sword up, his suppressed energy flaring in panic. Naruto didn't give him the chance. He was on him in an instant. His hand a blur as he disarmed the guard, the special sword clattering to the floor. Naruto's other hand chopped down on the side of the guard's neck, a precise, nerve-striking blow that paralyzed him without knocking him out. The guard collapsed, his body rigid, only his eyes able to move, wide with terror. Naruto crouched down, his face inches from the guards. His eyes seemed to glow in the dim light. "Who sent you?" he asked, his voice a low, dangerous whisper. The guard's eyes were defiant. He would not speak. Naruto sighed. "I really hoped you wouldn't be this stubborn." He didn't torture him. He didn't need to. He simply placed a hand on the guard's forehead and focused. He didn't use a jutsu. He used a sliver of his draconic power, not to attack, but to project. He pushed a single, unfiltered image into the guard's mind, the vision of Hadriel judging the golden dragon. He let the guard feel the absolute, cosmic terror of facing a god's judgment, the feeling of a soul being unmade. The guard's eyes widened in sheer, mind-breaking horror. A single, terrified tear rolled down his cheek. "Who sent you?" Naruto asked again, his voice calm. "Bale," the guard croaked, his will completely shattered. "Lord Bale," he said you were a blight, that your death would restore order, a pact." Naruto stood up, his expression cold. A pact. So the traitors were working with Hadriel's agents. This was more than just political maneuvering. This was treason. He efficiently bound the 3 assassins with the silken cords from the room's decorative curtains. He slung the paralyzed but conscious leader over his shoulder and walked out. He strode back into the main hall, his footsteps echoing in the late-night silence. The council had not adjourned. They were still there, locked in debate. Naruto kicked the doors open. All heads snapped towards him. He walked to the center of the room and unceremoniously dumped the 3 bound assassins onto the polished floor. "These are yours, I believe," he said, his voice ringing with cold fury. He pointed at the paralyzed leader. "This one was talkative. He told me that Lord Bale sent them to restore order." He then looked directly at the pasty-faced Lord Bale. He also mentioned something about a pact. The hall erupted into chaos. The elders shouted, some in disbelief, some in accusation. Lord Bale leapt to his feet, his face a mask of apoplectic rage and fear. "Lies. This is a trick. The creature has bewitched him." Throughout the pandemonium, Lord Zeodicus Grimori had remained silent, his steepled fingers covering his mouth. His eyes fixed on Naruto. He had watched the boy be challenged, threatened, and condemned. He had allowed the assassination attempt to proceed, a final, brutal test. He had seen Naruto, given every reason to unleash his monstrous power and tear the estate apart, choose instead to use his mind. He had neutralized the threat with surgical precision and brought the truth to light. He had shown loyalty not just to Rias, but to the honor of the house that was trying to cast him out. Zeodicus stood. A wave of pure, absolute power washed over the room, silencing the shouting instantly. The temperature dropped 20 degrees. Every devil in the room, from the most ancient elder to Lord Bale himself, froze, bowing their heads in submission to the will of their patriarch. Enough. Lord Grimori's voice was quiet, but it held the weight of a collapsing mountain. He looked at the trembling Lord Bale, and his eyes were not angry. They were filled with a cold, profound disappointment. "You have consorted with our enemies and brought shame upon your name and this council. Your title is forfeit. You are hereby banished from the House of Grimori and its territories. You will be lucky if the other Satans allow you to live." Lord Bale crumpled, his power and influence gone in a single sentence. Guards appeared and dragged him and the other traitorous elders away. Zeodicus then turned his gaze to Naruto. The stern mask was gone. In its place was a look of deep, grudging respect. "You have been tested, Naruto Uzumaki," he said, his voice resonating with power. "You have been tested by fire, by politics, and by betrayal, and you have not been found wanting. You have proven your worth not with the power of the dragon in your blood, but with the strength of the character in your heart." He descended from the dais, walking to stand before Naruto and Rias. "I declared you a catalyst. I was wrong. You are a foundation." He placed a hand on his daughter's shoulder, then looked at Naruto. "A house is only as strong as the bonds that hold it together." He raised his voice so all the remaining loyal elders could hear. "Let it be known, Naruto Uzumaki is hereby declared a formal ally and a protector of the House of Grimori. His enemies are our enemies. His honor is our honor." He then smiled, a true, warm smile for the first time. "However, that is not enough. An alliance is political. What I see before me is personal." He looked at his daughter, whose eyes were shining with tears of relief and joy. "To solidify this bond, to send a message to our allies and to the God who hides in the shadows, I will approve a union that will shake the foundations of the underworld." He took Rias's hand and Naruto's. "Rias, my daughter, if it is your will." Rias looked at Naruto, her heart so full she thought it might burst. She had fought for him, and he had fought for her. Now, her family was finally seeing the man she saw. She nodded, her eyes never leaving his. She drew a small, silver ritual dagger. She sliced a shallow cut on her palm, then offered the blade to Naruto. He understood. He did the same. As their blood welled up, she clasped his hand, pressing their palms together. "By my blood and my soul," Rias recited, the ancient words of the devil's betrothal pact falling from her lips, "I bind myself to you, Naruto Uzumaki. Let my power be your shield. Let your heart be my home. From this day, until the end of all days, we are one." A brilliant, intertwining aura of crimson demonic energy and golden draconic power erupted from their joined hands, filling the entire hall with a warm, powerful light. It was a perfect fusion, a symbol of a new age. A devil and a dragon, bound together not by law or politics, but by a bond forged in the fires of adversity. Lord Grimori's voice boomed through the hall, a formal announcement that would soon echo through every corner of the supernatural world. "Let it be known, I, Zeodicus Grimori, approve the engagement of my daughter, Rias Gremory, to Naruto Uzumaki. The shockwaves from this declaration were just beginning. And in a distant, sterile realm of light, Hadriel, the celestial arbiter, felt he thread of his influence within the Gremory clan sever completely. The path of subtle manipulation was now closed. His gambit had failed. Chapter 8 End. Chapter 9. The Siege of the Underworld. The nth that followed the betrothal ceremony was the quietest Naruto had known since arriving in this new world. It was the deep, humming silence of a world holding its breath. News of the union had ripped through the supernatural world like a shockwave. A Gremory heiress, one of the most prized pure bloods in the underworld, engaged to a human of unknown origin and immeasurable power. The conservative houses were scandalized. The progressive factions were intrigued. And their enemies, wherever they hid, were watching. For the members of the Occult Research Club, it was a time of intense, focused preparation. The Kuo Town Alliance, forged in crisis, began to feel less like a treaty and more like a genuine camaraderie. Naruto would often find Kiba and Xenovia in the training dimension, their demonic and holy swords clashing in a beautiful, deadly dance of mutual respect. Issei and Irina had developed a loud, boisterous rivalry, competing in everything from running laps to eating contests, their friendly bickering a constant, lively background noise. Azazel would pop in occasionally, armed with strange devices he would use to analyze Naruto's energy, muttering about interdimensional frequencies and chaotic resonance, before vanishing with a puff of black feathers. The heart of this new world, for Naruto, was the time he spent with Rias. They would train together, not as master and ally, but as partners. They practiced synchronizing their powers, a small sphere of destruction contained within a swirling vortex of draconic energy, an attack that could erase matter without an explosion. Their powers, now linked by the betrothal pact, resonated with a natural, effortless harmony. But it was the quiet moments that meant the most, sitting together in the clubroom long after the others had left. Sharing stories of their different worlds, her head resting on his shoulder. In her presence, the roaring whispers of the dragon in his blood grew quiet, soothed by the calm, steady beat of her heart. This fragile peace was shattered by a simultaneous wave of panic that washed over the entire supernatural world. Azazel appeared in the clubroom, not with a smirk, but with a face pale with dread. A stack of frantic intelligence reports in his hand. At the same moment, Searsex's face materialized in a projection of crimson light, his expression grimmer than Naruto had ever seen it. "He's making his move," Azazel said, his voice stripped of all its usual flippancy. "My spies within the forgotten celestial realms have just sent a final, desperate message. Hadriel is activating a weapon. They're calling it the Genesis Requiem. Our own intelligence confirms it." Searsex's voice boomed from the projection. "It is not a conventional weapon. It does not destroy matter. It targets the very essence of a being. It is a genetic and spiritual disruptor. Once fired, it will send a wave of purifying energy across this dimension and all adjacent ones." Rias's hand flew to her mouth. "What does it target?" Searsex's gaze was heavy with apocalyptic certainty. "According to the fragmented data we have, its primary targets are the two most prominent sources of chaos in this world. The spiritual signature of the original 72 pillars of the devil race. And the genetic markers of all dragon kin." A chilling silence fell over the room. It was genocide. A silent, blow, odless apocalypse aimed directly at them. "He intends to erase us from existence," Rias whispered in horror. "Where is it?" Naruto demanded, his voice a low growl. "In his personal sanctuary," Azazel answered, pointing to a holographic map that had sprung into existence. It showed a swirling, white-gold nebula. A pocket dimension known as Arbiter's Crest. "It's a fortress, a world built on his philosophy of absolute order. Our fleets can't get near it. The very environment is hostile to demonic and chaotic energies." "How long do we have?" Naruto asked. "Hours," Searsex stated. "The Requiem is in its final charging sequence. By the next dawn in the human world, it will fire." A desperate, high-level war council was convened instantly, the projected forms of Michael, Searsex, Azazel, and even Lord Gremory appearing in the clubroom. The situation was grim. A frontal assault was impossible. The defenses of Arbiter's Crest were absolute. As the leaders debated strategies of containment and last-ditch defenses, Naruto, the shinobi, the veteran of a war won by impossible gambits, saw another way. "We can't win a straight fight," Naruto said, his voice cutting through the debate and drawing all eyes to him. "So we don't give him one. We give him two." He looked at the leaders. "We need a diversion. A massive, all-out assault on the main gates of his fortress. Something so big, so loud. He has to commit all his forces to stop it." While his eyes are on the front door, a small team slips in through the back. Azazel's eyes lit up with a wild, dangerous spark. A classic infiltration and sabotage mission. "I love it, but how do we get them in? The dimensional walls are sealed." "I've been working on a prototype dimensional drill," Azazel said, a manic grin spreading across his face. "Risky as all hell. It'll tear a temporary hole in the fabric of his world, but it'll be unstable. You'd have minutes, maybe less, to get through. And it'll be messy. It's our only shot," Sirzex said, his eyes gleaming with a newfound respect for Naruto's strategic mind. The desperate, unorthodox plan was approved. The armies of the three factions, a force of angels, fallen angels, and devils that had not been seen since the apocalyptic days of the Great War, gathered at the edge of known space. At their head were Sirzex, Michael, and Azazel, their power a trinity of light, darkness, and twilight. Ready to unleash hell upon the gates of heaven. Their mission? To buy time. At a hidden staging ground miles away, the strike team prepared. It was Naruto, Rias, and her entire peerage. Their mission? To save the world. "This is a suicide mission," Kiba said, his voice grim as he checked the edge of his sword. "The best kind," Naruto replied with a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. He looked at each of them. Kiba's resolve, Kaniko's stoicism, Akino's fierce glare, Issei's terrified but determined face. And then he looked at Rias, who stood before him, clad in her own crimson battle armor. She looked not like a princess, but a queen going to war. She stepped forward, placing her hands on his chest. "Come back to me," she whispered, her voice a fierce, desperate plea. "Always," he promised, his voice thick with an emotion he couldn't name. He leaned down and kissed her, a hard, desperate kiss filled with the terror of the unknown and the certainty of their bond. Then, Azazel gave the signal. A monstrous, jury-rigged machine roared to life, and a jagged, screaming tear in reality opened before them. Beyond it lay a world of pure, blinding white light. "Go!" Azazel yelled over the dimensional shriek. Godspeed. They leapt through the portal, one after another, into the heart of the enemy's fortress. Arbiter's Crest was a nightmare of perfect, sterile order. The sky was a featureless white expanse. The ground was made of smooth, seamless pearlescent stone. Geometric structures of hard light pulsed with a low, harmonic hum that grated on their demonic senses. The very air felt thin and abrasive, designed to suffocate chaotic energies. Their infiltration had been successful, but they were immediately met with the sanctuary's automated defenses. Their first trial was a long, impossibly straight corridor. The moment they stepped into it, the walls began to shift, extruding razor-sharp blades of light in complex, high-speed patterns. "It's a maze of death," Issei shrieked. "Kiba, lead the way," Rias commanded. Kiba didn't hesitate. "Stay right behind me," he yelled, and then he was a blur. He moved with a speed that seemed to defy physics, his sword a silver streak as he parried and deflected the blades that were too fast to dodge. He became their pathfinder, his peerless speed the only thing that could navigate the corridor of absolute precision. He emerged on the other side, bleeding from a dozen minor cuts, but he had gotten them through. The next chamber was a vast, empty cube. The door slammed shut behind them, and a crushing weight pressed down on them all. "Gravity field," Sona's voice would have said, had she been there. Kaniko grunted, her small frame trembling under the immense pressure. In the center of the room, a large, glowing crystal pulsed, the power source. "Kaniko, it's all you," Rias grunted, struggling to stay on her feet. Kaniko nodded, her teeth gritted. A soft, white aura of senjutsu flared to life around her. Roaring with effort, she took a single, slow, earth-shattering step, then another. She moved towards the crystal, the very air shimmering around her under the strain. She reached the crystal, cocked her small fist back, and punched. The resulting shockwave, amplified by the immense gravity, shattered the crystal and sent a wave of force that momentarily negated the field, giving them just enough time to escape into the next room. They found themselves in a chamber that was perfectly silent. It was a dead space, and the moment the door closed, Akeno cried out, the holy lightning and demonic darn. SS that comprised her magic sputtering and dying. Harmonic frequency. Rias realized. It's tuned to cancel out supernatural energies. From the walls, angelic golems of cold stone and light emerged, their movements silent and implacable. They were powerless. But Akeno, robbed of her magic, smiled a feral, dangerous smile. She cracked her knuckles. If I can't use magic, she said, her voice a low growl, I'll just have to beat them to death the old-fashioned way. She had trained in hand-to-hand combat under Naruto, and she now led the charge, a whirlwind of furious, precise strikes, proving she was far more than just her power. They fought their way through, battered and exhausted, their teamwork and Naruto's strategies the only things keeping them alive. Finally, they reached it, a chalk MBER so vast it seemed to have its own horizon. In the center, floating amidst a complex web of energy conduits, was the Genesis Requiem. It was a massive, gyroscopic sphere of crystal and white gold metal, already glowing with a terrifying, world-ending power. And guarding it were the last of the seraphic executioners. At their head stood Lathal, the silver-haired man from the tournament, his expression as serene and detached as ever. You have come far, children of chaos, Lathal said, his harmonious voice echoing in the vast chamber. But your journey, and your existence, ends here. That's our line, Naruto said, stepping forward. Rias, get to the Requiem. He commanded. Everyone else, buy her time. The final battle began. The Grimoire Peerage, in a last, desperate stand, engaged the executioners. Kiba and Zenobia fought back to back, a whirlwind of demonic and holy steel. Kaneko and Akeno became a tag team of brute force and martial arts. Issei, seeing Rias struggling to Brea, K through the final energy barrier around the Requiem, made his choice. Promotion. Queen, he roared. Golden light enveloped him, and for a moment, he was granted the power of a queen piece. He threw himself in front of Rias, his body forming a living shield, absorbing a volley of light spears that would have killed her. He collapsed, his armor shattering, but he had bought her the opening she needed. While his friends fought and fell for him, Naruto faced Lathal. The duel was a blur of gold and white. Naruto activated his Sage Dragon mode, his power a storm of controlled chaos. But Lathal was prepared. He had the data from their last encounter. He moved with a flawless, predictive grace, his blades of light countering Naruto's every move. He was not trying to overpower Naruto, he was disassembling him, piece by piece. Why do you fight so hard for a flawed world? Lathal asked, his blade locking with Naruto's scaled claws. A world of pain, of conflict, of death. We offer purity, an end to all suffering. A perfect, ordered peace. A world without the freedom to make mistakes isn't peace, it's a prison. Naruto roared back, pushing him away. The flaws, the struggles, that's what makes life worth living. That's what makes us strong. But he was weakening. The Sage Dragon mode was draining him, and Lathal was relentless. The silver-haired warrior found an opening, his sword of light piercing through Naruto's defenses, plunging deep into his shoulder. Naruto cried out, staggering back. He was going to lose. Rias, having just broken through the final barrier around the Requiem, saw him fall. She saw her peerage on the verge of being overwhelmed. She saw the man she loved, bleeding and broken. And in that moment, she made a choice. Her duty was not to the weapon. It was to him. She turned away from the Genesis Requiem. She extended her hand towards Naruto, her eyes blazing with a love so fierce it was a power in itself. Naruto, she screamed, her voice raw with desperation and absolute conviction. Take it all. She poured everything she was, her demonic power, her life force, her very soul, through the pact that bound them together. A torrent of pure, crimson-black energy, the unadulterated power of destruction, shot from her and enveloped Naruto. The pain from his wound vanished, replaced by an agony that was 1,000 times worse, and a power that was 1,000,000 times greater. The golden energy of his Sage Dragon mode and the crimson power of the Grimoire clan clashed within him, a war between creation and destruction. But then, guided by his Uzumaki life force, they did not destroy each other. They merged. He screamed, his voice a sound that was both a dragon's roar and a devil's cry. His aura exploded, a vortex of black, red, and gold tea. Hat shattered the very floor of the chamber. His armor of scales turned the color of obsidian, laced with glowing golden circuits. His hair flashed to a stark, brilliant white, and a third eye, glowing. G with the crimson light of the power of destruction, opened on his forehead. He had become something new. A perfect synthesis of dragon, devil, and sage. The sovereign dragon. Lathel stared, his serene composure finally shattering, replaced by sheer, undiluted awe and terror. What are you? Naruto looked at him, his three eyes glowing with an ancient, terrible power. He didn't answer. He simply raised a hand. A sphere of swirling energy, a perfect balance of golden creation and crimson destruction, materialized in his palm. He flicked his wrist. The sphere shot forward, not with speed, but with an unnerving, absolute certainty. It did not explode upon impact with Lathel. It simply erased him. One moment, the second in command of a god was there. The next, there was nothing. Not even motes of light remained. The other executioners froze, their battle forgotten, before they too were unmade by the pressure of Naruto's mere presence. Silence. Naruto turned his gaze, his three eyes falling upon the Genesis Requiem, which was now pulsing with its final, world-ending charge. He floated towards it, the exhausted and awestruck members of the Grimoire Peerage watching from below. He would not just destroy it. He would unmake it. He placed his palms on the crystalline surface of the weapon. He did not push. He did not blast. He simply released the power within him, a controlled wave of balanced creation and destruction. The Requiem, a machine of absolute, singular order, could not comprehend the paradox. It tried to purify the demonic energy while being overwhelmed by the draconic life force. It tried to reject the chaotic energy while being unmade by the destructive power. The great machine shuddered. Cracks of crimson and gold light spread across its surface. It let out a final, piercing shriek that echoed across dimensions, and then, with a silent, blinding flash of intertwined light, it imploded, collapsing in on itself and taking the entirety of Arbiter's crest with it. The last thing Naruto saw was Rias's face, her eyes wide, reaching for him, before the universe dissolved into white. Chapter 9 End. Chapter 10. The Dawn of a New Era. There was no light, no sound, no feeling. There was only an endless, silent, sterile white void. Naruto drifted in the non-space, the echo of the Genesis Requiem's implosion the last thing he remembered. His sovereign dragon form was gone. The borrowed power of a devil princess and the ancient rage of the dragon both spent. He was just Naruto again, his consciousness a flickering ember in an infinite expanse of nothing. He was tired, a bone-deep, soul-deep exhaustion that went beyond any physical injury. It would be so easy to just let go. To let the ember go out and dissolve into the white. He was ready. He had saved them. He had kept his promise. It was enough. As he began to drift apart, a single, warm thread of crimson light pierced the void. It wasn't bright or powerful, but it was real. It was a lifeline. He felt a gentle, insistent pull. A familiar presence calling his name. Rias. The betrothal pact. The bond of blood and soul they had forged in her father's hall. It was a connection that transcended dimensions, a beacon in the nothingness. He focused on that thread, on the feeling of her hand in his, on the memory of her laughter, on the fierce, protective love in her eyes. He clung to it with the last vestiges of his will. He was not just a protector, he was a partner, a husband, and he had one more promise to keep. He had to come back to her. He pulled, and the thread of light pulled back, guiding him out of the silent white and back towards the world of color and sound and life. He awoke to the smell of antiseptic herbs and the soft, cool touch of a damp cloth on his forehead. He blinked, his eyes open. The light of the room a gentle, welcome sensation. He was in a large, comfortable bed, in a room with high, arched windows that looked out onto a crimson sky. The Grimoire Medical Wing. You're awake. Rias's voice was a soft, choked whisper. She was sitting in a chair by his bedside, her hand holding the cloth she had been using to cool his head. She looked exhausted, with dark circles under her eyes. But those blue-green eyes were shining with more relief and love than he had ever seen. He learned later that she hadn't left his side for a single moment of the 3 days he had been unconscious. He tried to sit up, a groan escaping his lips. Every muscle in his body felt like it had been shredded. Rias was instantly there, helping him, propping pillows behind his back. "The peerage," he rasped, his throat dry. "Recovering," she said, a watery smile gracing her lips as she offered him a glass of water. "Kiba has a few cracked ribs. Kaneko is complaining about being bored. Issei is bragging to anyone who will listen about how he took a hit for his king. They're all alive. They're all safe. Because of you. And Hadriel. Gone," she said, her expression growing serious. "Sirzex and Michael combined their powers to stabilize the collapsing dimension just long enough to pull us out. They said the destruction of the Requiem, Hadriel's life's work and the source of his power, created a feedback loop. He wasn't killed. He was unmade, cast adrift in the sea of chaos between worlds. The war is over, Naruto." The words settled over him, heavy and final. The war was over. They had won. He looked at Rias, at the profound, bone-deep relief in her eyes, and knew that the cost had been worth it. The main armies of the Alliance had taken casualties in their diversionary attack. A heavy price for their victory. The days that followed were filled with quiet mourning for the fallen, a somber reminder that peace was a treasure bought with sacrifice. Weeks later, a grand summit was held in the Grimoire capital. It wasn't a tense meeting of rivals, but a gathering of allies. The old world order was dead. In its place, something new was being born. The traitorous House of Baal was formally dissolved, its members stripped of their titles and territories. Azazel, in an unprecedented move, announced that the Grigori would establish a joint research initiative, sharing their knowledge of sacred gears and other phenomena with devils and angels. Michael proposed the formation of the Brave Saints system, a joint task force of powerful warriors from all three factions, dedicated to monitoring and neutralizing interdimensional threats. A new era of cooperation, born from the crucible of a shared apocalypse, had begun. Naruto was escorted to the summit's main hall, a guest of honor. He stood before the leaders of the new world he had helped to save. "Naruto Uzumaki," Sirzex said, his voice filled with a genuine, profound respect that echoed through the silent hall. "No title we could offer would be sufficient to reward you for your deeds. You are a hero of all three factions. A kingmaker, a savior." He gestured to a map of the underworld. "We would offer you territory, a noble title of your own, a formal seat on this council as the guardian of the pact, a symbol of the strength that unity can bring." The offers were staggering. Power, wealth, status beyond imagination. The boy who had once been an outcast, scorned by his own village, was being offered a kingdom. Naruto looked at the faces of the powerful beings before him. Then he looked to the side of the hall, where Rias and her peerage stood watching. He saw his family. He smiled. He turned back to the council and gave a small, respectful bow. "Thank you for the generous offers," he said, his voice calm and clear. "But I have to decline." A stunned silence filled the hall. "I'm not a lord or a politician," Naruto continued simply. "I'm not a guardian or a king. I'm a shinobi, a protector. My place is not on a council. My place is with my family." His gaze met Rias's, and his smile softened. "The Grimoire peerage. That's the only title I need." His humility, his absolute rejection of the power they offered in favor of the bonds he had forged, accomplished what no display of strength ever could. It earned him their absolute, unwavering respect. He wasn't just a powerhouse to be feared. He was a man of character to be admired. That night, as he lay in his bed in the Grimoire estate, he felt a familiar, grumpy presence in the back of his mind. It was faint, a mere echo, but it was unmistakable. "So, you're not dead after all, you brat." "Kurama," Naruto thought, his heart leaping. He closed his eyes and found himself in his mindscape, before the familiar, massive cage. The great fox was lying down, looking older, somehow, but his 9 tails swished with familiar annoyance. "The energy you released when you destroyed that machine tore a temporary hole through everything," Kurama grumbled. "It was enough to re-establish a faint link. Don't get used to it." "The war?" Naruto asked, the question he had been afraid to voice for months. "What happened?" "You were declared killed in action," Kurama said, his voice softening slightly. Your final act was seen as a sacrifice that turned the tide. It worked, Naruto. The war is over. Kakashi is the sixth Hokage. There's peace. They built you a pretty big statue in the village. A sense of profound, quiet closure washed over Naruto. Not sadness, not regret, just peace. His old dream had been fulfilled. His old home was safe. He had done it. He was free to fully embrace his new life. Thank you, Kurama, he thought. For everything. HMPH. Just don't go dying for real, you idiot. You still owe me half your life for rent. The connection faded, leaving Naruto with a final, peaceful smile on his face. The wedding of Naruto Uzumaki and Rias Gremory was the single greatest political and social event in the underworld's modern history. It was held in a grand, open-air cathedral in the Gremory capital, under the beautiful, crimson-lit sky. The guest list was a living symbol of the new era. The four great Satans sat in the front row. Beside them, the Archangel Michael chatted amiably with a bemused Azazel. Dragon King Tannen, in his massive draconic form, observed from a respectful distance. Sona Citri and her peerage, Zenobia and Irina representing the unified church, and hundreds of other powerful beings from every corner of their world had all gathered to bear witness. When Rias walked down the aisle, on the arm of her proud father, a hush fell over the crowd. She was breathtaking, a vision in a gown that was a fusion of demonic elegance and human tradition. But when she reached the altar and took Naruto's hand, all he could see were her eyes, shining with a love that was as boundless as the sky above them. Their vows were not the traditional, flowery prose of nobles. They were real. They were theirs. I was a princess in a cage, Naruto, Rias said, her voice trembling but strong. A prisoner of my own name and power. I thought my future was a cold, lonely path of duty. Then you fell into my life, a chaotic, stubborn, impossible boy from another world. You didn't see a princess. You saw me. You broke down the door to my cage and showed me that true strength isn't about power or bloodlines. It's about the will to protect the ones you love. You are my home, Naruto Uzumaki. And I will spend an eternity cherishing it. Naruto took a deep breath, his own heart overflowing. I came to this world with nothing, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I was lost, alone, and broken. You found me in a dark alley and offered me a lifeline. You gave me a place to stay, a purpose. You gave me a family. You took in a monster that everyone else cast out and you called him your friend, your partner, your family. You were the person who taught me that a home isn't a place you're from. It's a person you can't imagine living without. I love you, Rias Gremory. And I will spend my life protecting your smile. They sealed their vows not just with a devil's pact of blood, but with a simple, human kiss. Under the watchful, approving eyes of angels, fallen angels, and devils. It was a promise, a symbol of a new world where such things were not only possible, but celebrated. The story does not end there. In that grand cathedral, it ends several months later, back in a peaceful, rebuilt Kuo town. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. On the porch of a newly built house, not the clubhouse, but a home, their home, Naruto and Rias sat together on a simple wooden swing. They were not the sovereign dragon and the crimson-haired ruined princess. They were just Naruto and Rias, husband and wife. Issei finally passed his exams, Rias said with a laugh. Barely. I think Sona had to pull some strings. And Akano is going to visit her father next month, Naruto added. A warm smile on his face. About time. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the lights of their town begin to twinkle on. They didn't speak of gods or wars. They spoke of their friends, of their future. Of the quiet, simple, beautiful life they had fought so hard to build together. Rias leaned her head on his shoulder, and he wrapped an arm around her, holding her close. He whispers of the dragon in his blood were gone, replaced by the steady, peaceful rhythm of their life together. He had been a boy chasing a dream of being acknowledged. He had become a man who had earned a world of love. He looked out at the setting sun, at the peaceful town they had saved, at the woman in his arms who was his everything. He was finally, truly, home. Chapter 10 End.